Chapter 26. Max Hayden was lying on the ground with a bruised face and nose, staring blankly at the exhibition sky with a confused expression. He racked his brains but couldn't figure out why there was such a huge gap between the two who were both said to be comparable to the 10 wizard saints. Even if he tried his best, the final result was that he was crushed by guildarts in the opposite direction. Max Hayden obviously hadn't realized at this time that there was a gap between the 10 saints. If his strength had just reached the level of the last of the 10 wizard saints, then guildarts was definitely the strongest one under the 4 heavenly kings of Ishgar. Max Hayden looked at the fist that was getting bigger and bigger, and he spread his hands and gave up resistance completely. Before he fell into a coma, he regretted his shallowness and recklessness. What a tough opponent. Guildarts, who was almost unharmed and only consumed a little magic power, sat on a stone and sighed in an ordinary way, somewhat like Ian. Originally, he planned to quickly deal with the opponent and then go to support Urusha and Urza, but now it seems that there is no need. Guildarts has noticed the 2 magical powers that suddenly appeared in the 2 battlefields. Unlike Heibarian, who was determined to fight to the death from the beginning, he caught Randolph off guard with a tactic of fighting to the death, and forced the other party to surrender without seriously injuring Randolph. The battle between Uru and Wiz entered a white-hot stage from the very beginning. I don't know if it was to warn Urusha, but Ur launched a fierce attack from the beginning of the battle. Ice spikes, ice blades, and ice roses shot at Wiz continuously. Wiz, who had fought with Uru before, did not dare to be as careless as she was when facing Urusha and Urza. She quickly dodged the winding ice roses and protected herself tightly with 3 ice shields. Uru's attack was like a tide, one wave after another. Wiz was not to be outdone, and also created countless ice spikes and ice spears to engage in a passionate battle with Uru. The sound of tinkling continued to echo in the forest. Soon, the ground was covered with ice chips and the surrounding branches were also covered with a layer of white frost. After more than 10 minutes of magical bombardment, Uru suddenly jumped back, dodging the ice blade that was shooting towards her, and looked at Wiz, who had also stopped with a smile. That's enough for these tentative attacks, Wiz. Now I'm going to get serious. Wiz didn't say anything, but just nodded silently. Ulu concentrated his energy and held his breath, and suddenly all the magic power in his body burst out, and a beam of white light shot up into the sky. Ice World. Suddenly, white snowflakes fell from the sky, and the cold air formed by the powerful magic made the area within a radius of several hundred meters shrouded in a world of white. Silently, a layer of frost climbed up along Wiz's ankles, and before she could react, her body instantly turned into a lifelike ice sculpture. A second before being frozen, Wiz saw out of the corner of his eye that the entire area seemed to have turned into a pure white world. But Uru's magic didn't restrain Wiz for long. In just a few seconds, Wiz broke free from the ice. This magic is very powerful. Feeling the suppression of this white world, Wiz said seriously. It's a pity that I still couldn't defeat you. Ulu said with a little regret. However, Wiz shook her head, if we only talk about the field of ice magic, I am not as good as you. What are you going to do next? Uru asked with concern. From what I understand, Lord Heibarian, the second seat of 10 wizard saints, has also taken action this time. His target is Randolph Lambert. Uru didn't know that Wiz and Heibarian had had a brief battle not long ago, but it didn't matter. I want to find Violet first. Wiz said softly. I'm sorry, Uru. Wiz knew that Uru wanted her to leave the quagmire of the Blood Forest, but she had her own reasons for staying, so she could only reject Uru again. Looking at her gradually receding back, Ulu could only sigh helplessly. On the other side, Violet felt extremely troubled when looking at the short, ugly-looking man. On the one hand, she had never seen a wizard from a regular guild whose resistance to her charm magic was so low. Even with just a glance from her, they would reveal an ugly perverted look. On the other hand, she had never seen a wizard with such a huge contrast between before and after. Every time she wanted to attack the man's companion, no matter what means she used, this wretched and despicable man would break free from her charm, repel her and fall into her magic again. She wanted to defeat the man first, but was blocked by his 2 companions, and then fell into a cycle again. This ugly, shameless, vulgar, despicable, dirty, and mean BD. Violet used all the vulgar words she could think of to describe Yet. At this moment, she was already feeling a little discouraged. Just when she was hesitating, the 2 beams of light, one red and one white, in the sea of trees became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Feeling the 2 magical powers that were completely different from those of Randolph Lambert and Wiz, Violet couldn't help but have a bad premonition in his heart, and it became stronger as time passed. Feeling uneasy, she finally chose a strategic retreat after a difficult struggle. Sheng and Karen watched the enemy disappear into the dense forest but did not dare to pursue him. They could only stay by his side all night, waiting for him to wake up or for reinforcements to arrive. Guildarts arrived shortly after Willett left. At the same time, the battle between Jura in Lamia Scale and Sela in Tartaros also ended with Sela's retreat. Compared to the other 3 guilds that participated in the joint crusade, Jura did not have to fight as hard as Fairy Tail and Blue Pegasus, nor did it encounter an enemy that it could not contend with like the ruler of Phantom. Looking at Sela as leaving back, Jura frowned and a hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. He had a strong feeling that this beautiful and elegant girl was not using her full strength in the fight with him. She seemed to be just trying to hold him back. But what is the other party's purpose in doing this? Jura was in deep confusion. It was not until Sela's back completely disappeared from his sight that he temporarily put aside the complicated thoughts in his mind and turned to rush towards the place where the coalition forces were gathering. The punctuation marks in some previous chapters disappeared inexplicably, and will be corrected later. Chapter 27. The council headquarters is more than 100 meters underground, where the most vicious criminals are imprisoned. Although the buildings on the ground were completely destroyed, the prison buried deep underground was not affected much. And it was not as cold and damp as people imagined, but brightly lit, just like daylight, illuminating every corner of the prison and completely erasing their thoughts of escaping. Hyberian personally escorted his former junior fellow apprentice here. In the years to come, you will repent for the sins you have committed here. Randolph Lambert stared at Hyberian, seemingly without any anger or resentment at being arrested. His narrow eyes were chillingly calm. Suddenly, he tilted his head and revealed an evil smile. Barian, a frog in a well can never see how vast the world outside the well is. Hyberian was not angry at being ridiculed. In his opinion, this was just the other party's incompetent rage of not accepting defeat. If you can't even see the whole picture of the well, how can you talk about the world outside the well? He said it lightly. Randolph Lambert just smiled faintly, then turned and walked into his cell under Hyberian's stern gaze. The iron door slowly closed behind him, making a heavy sound, announcing that all his connections with the outside world had been cut off. If the news of the attack on the council headquarters shocked the surface world of the magic world dominated by regular guilds, then the removal of Blood Forest caused an uproar in the inner world led by the Balam Alliance. Even though they were only 4 people, all the dark guilds that had tried to challenge their position over the years had become the dust of history. The power that was above the Saint Mage could almost be said to be at the top of the Ishgar continent. Because Tartaros and Grimoire Heart are too mysterious and rarely seen in battle, many dark guilds believe that Blood Forest is the strongest in the Balam Alliance. But one of the giants of the dark world has now fallen in a joint crusade organized by the Council of Advocates. This has made everyone in the dark world feel insecure, and some ambitious people have begun to stir. However, the other 2 guilds that were part of the Balam Alliance along with Blood Forest, Tartaros, and Grimoire Heart, seemed to be oblivious to the twists and turns of the dark world. They allowed the dark guilds below to attack each other and rob Blood Forest's legacy without any unnecessary moves, and remained as silent as usual. The Magic Council naturally noticed the unrest in the dark world, but after their headquarters suffered a devastating blow, they were no longer able to organize a third crusade. Meanwhile, no one in the regular guilds was willing to offend the dark world at this time and become the target of criticism from many dark guilds. The black and white sides of the magic world have reached a strange balance through this silent tacit understanding. In the battle for the Blood Forest's legacy, a guild suddenly emerged from an unnoticed corner. With the strength of only 6 people, it defeated more than a dozen dark guilds, including some powerful old guilds. The name of this guild is Oration Cease, and the guild leader is Brain. Although the other 5 members are all teenagers, their strength should not be underestimated. Including the subordinate guilds, nearly 90% of the Blood Forest's heritage was taken over by Oration Cease with an absolutely strong attitude. Only a few guilds were completely defeated by Oration Cease or defected to Tartaros and Grimoire Heart. It was still the same castle, and the people coming from Tartaros were still Goddess of the Chill Moon. Sela and Jackal, and the representative of Grimoire Heart was still the President Hades. But the person sitting in the seat of Blood Forest was no longer Randolph Lambert, but the president of Oration Cease, Brain. President Hades is really calculating. Goddess of the Chill Moon Sela sat in her seat, like a lonely and arrogant snow lotus on an iceberg, revealing an aura of keeping strangers away. Her fingers gently stroked the book in her hand, her eyes cold and deep. Perhaps because of the absence of Max Hayden, Jackal was in a very good mood, and even felt that Hades was much more pleasing to the eye. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a smug smile. Didn't Tartaros get what he wanted? Hades smiled faintly. Although this operation was a deal between him and Brain, Tartaros seemed to have seen through their plan from somewhere, and with the cover of them in the Blood Forest, he also achieved his own goal. Goddess of the Chill Moon. Sela touched the spine of the book in her hand, her expression calm and unfathomable. Brain sat quietly aside, watching their verbal exchange silently, his eyes dark and deep, and no one knew what he was planning. But soon he could no longer stay out of it, as both Goddess of the Chill Moon. Sela and Hades turned their attention to him. President Brain, I am looking forward to what kind of story oration Cease can write. Goddess of the Chill Moon. Sela said calmly, and then her figure gradually disappeared into the darkness. Her meaningful words also made Brain frown. Tartaros has always been so mysterious. Compared to them, you should probably focus more on what you are going to do next. Hades said lightly, Brain, it is not easy to hold the position of one of the three Ramel triangles. Brain heard the threat in Hades' words but didn't take it seriously. At least in the short term, there would be no conflict between him and Hades. As for the future, who can predict it? The only thing that confused him was that Hades didn't seem to be worried at all that Tartaros would expose his plan. The first and last meeting of the new Balam Alliance ended hastily with everyone having their own agenda. The change in the structure of the dark world of magic came to an end in such a sensational yet silent way. At the same time, a series of chain reactions occurred in the regular guilds because of this crusade. After being on the front pages of major magic weeklies and magazines for a week, the news of the attack on the council headquarters was finally replaced by another sensational news. The leader of the ruler of Phantom, one of the strongest guilds in the kingdom of Fiori, has died. In this crusade, the ruler of Phantom was the only one injured in the regular guild, and the four elements that served as the trump card suffered a devastating blow. Arya of the Sky and Soul of the Earth were seriously injured and needed at least half a year to recover. Light Wizard Dorothy died, and the magic source of Saint Healer Darcy was irreversibly damaged. She quit the guild and gave up her identity as a wizard in despair. Upon receiving the bad news, the Phantom Guild leader, who had been bedridden, fainted from anger on the spot and died on the hospital bed not long after. José Porla, the successor, immediately announced the formation of a new Phantom Four after dealing with his father's funeral. In order to appease the ghosts and to reward them for their contributions in the crusade, the council awarded José Porla the title of the 10 Holy Mages, while Fairy Tail, Blue Pegasus and Lamia Scale received double the bounty. Makarov, who had intended to cause trouble for the Phantom, immediately had his eyes turned into the shape of gold coins after seeing the heavy iron box. All his previous plans were instantly thrown out of his mind, and he just held the mountain of gold coins and laughed like a pervert the whole day. Guild Arts took on a 10-year mission and left in a hurry before Ian returned to the guild. Yu, who returned to the northern continent, also informed Ian of what happened during her absence through a letter. Sitting on the roof of the guild, Ian watched the piece of letter paper in his hand float into the sky with the wind, and then turned into a ball of brilliant flame and disappeared in the sunset. The gears of a new era have begun to turn, Answer Ramel, and it's time to put an end to our relationship. However, before Ian could finish his sigh, he was frightened the next second. If you dare to be lazy again, I will kill you. Lord Ian Bell, the ancestor of magic. A faint voice sounded in his ears. Ian looked back and met Arusha's cold, murderous eyes. Ian didn't hesitate at all, he stepped hard, made a hole in the roof and jumped into the guild. Soon Makarov's roar sounded, and the guild was in chaos again. At the same time, in a secret, dimly lit room, Ulysses Young slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 28. Myra Jane has been a little irritable lately. She and Urza were the same age, but Urza got the permission from the guild leader to go out on a mission, while she could only stay in the guild, feeling frustrated and having no place to vent. Although she no longer had to worry about survival like before, watching her mortal enemy walk in front of her was even more painful than killing her. Myra had considered accepting commissions secretly, but Natsu, that idiot, actually tried to steal a commission in front of the president. Since then, the guild has strengthened the management of the task bar, and at the same time, she has completely stopped the idea of sneaking away. Because of this incident, Natsu was put in a sack when he returned home for 3 consecutive nights. He came to the guild with a bruised face every next day. He still hasn't found the murderer. One day, when Ian was lazily lying in the guild, he suddenly saw a huge egg walking into the guild. He rubbed his eyes, and when he was about to go forward to check after making sure he was not seeing things, he heard a babyish panting sound. Hey, hey! Urza, what's going on? Ian quickly stood up and went over to pick up the huge egg, taking Wendy with him as well, who let out a cute exclamation. Just now when we were on our way to the guild, this egg suddenly fell from the sky and landed in front of Wendy. Urza walked in following Wendy, with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Wendy, who was placed on the table by Ian along with the egg, had red cheeks and held the egg tightly in her hands, looking extremely cute. I know, Wendy must be hungry, she wants to eat this egg. Gray suddenly clapped his hands and said smartly with a smug smile on his face. Wendy immediately showed a horrified expression, looking at Gray as if he were a demon, holding the egg that was bigger than her tightly with both hands, fearing that Gray would really roast her egg. Her eyes were slightly red, as if she was about to cry in the next second. Perverted and filthy man, you scared Wendy. Myra couldn't stand Gray's abstract thinking and knocked him to the ground with a punch. If you make her cry, you will be killed by Arusha. Not only Myra, but also other people joined the ranks of condemning Gray after seeing Wendy's tearful look. The guild was suddenly filled with accusations against Gray, as if he had done something unforgivable. Gray was so angry when he saw this scene that he was shaking all over. He was covered in cold sweat early in the morning and his hands and feet were cold. Can this guild ever be good? What do I want you to be satisfied with? Tears flowed down my cheeks. The guild is full of oppression from the witch, Ursha, the tyrant, Urza, and the devil, Myra. When can I stand up? However, no one paid attention to Gray's inner sadness. He could only walk aside silently and enjoy this lonely time alone. Just when everyone was busy comforting Wendy, outside the guild, a cherry-haired boy rushed into the guild with a giant egg on his head. Guess what I found? Natsu shouted excitedly to the people in the guild. The people in the guild looked at each other. You have it all on your head, so do you still need to guess? An egg? Macau wiped the sweat from his forehead and asked tentatively. I was just training in the forest, and this egg suddenly fell from the sky and hit me on the head. Natsu almost let the cat out of the bag, but he quickly changed his words. There was a hint of pride in his tone, as if being hit by the egg was something to be proud of. This time, not only Macau, but everyone wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads. He was hit on the head by such a big egg, but he could still act as if nothing had happened. The Iron Head skill is so terrifying. But the egg seems to be more terrifying. It didn't break even after falling from such a high place and hitting Natsu on the head. It must be as hard as steel. An egg this big must be a dragon egg. Uncle Ian, do you think Ignir is hiding inside? Ian was also silenced by Natsu's train of thought. He didn't know if Ignil was hidden in the egg, but he knew that Ignil would be very angry after hearing it. Ignir, who was somewhere in an unknown space, suddenly sneezed a few times, and his saliva fell into the lava, splashing some magma. Stop bragging, you droopy-eyed guy. Gray, who had regained his energy upon seeing Natsu's arrival, came over and said contemptuously, Wendy also picked up the same egg as you. You are provoking me. Natsu was about to fight back but suddenly caught the key point of Gray's words and immediately looked behind everyone. Wendy was sitting on the table, holding an egg that was bigger than her in her white and tender hands. Great, Wendy, I was right. Amid everyone's puzzled gazes, Natsu suddenly jumped up excitedly, this must be a dragon egg. Mine contains Ignir, and yours contains Gege Grandine. Seeing that Natsu racked his brains but couldn't remember the name, Ian added it for him. Right. Natsu nodded confidently, as long as we hatch it, Ignir and Grandine will come back. Wendy fluttered her big eyes, looking confused, but a hint of anticipation flashed in her eyes. Seeing that Wendy was almost fooled, Ian took action immediately. Plan. Natsu was hit by an ancestral knife, and was unharmed by such a big egg, but after being hit by the knife, he held his head and rolled on the ground. Uncle Ian, why did you hit me all of a sudden? Are you an idiot? How big is this egg? Can Ignir and Grandine fit in it? Ian poked Natsu's forehead and said unhappily. Natsu then half realized it. So you also think it's a dragon egg? Boom. Almost everyone fell to the ground. Ian could only cover his face, not knowing what expression to show. He was very suspicious of what Ignil had taught Natsu. The innocent dragon sneezed a few more times. Feeling that he could no longer communicate with Natsu, Ian simply turned his gaze to Gray. Gray, what did you say before? Wendy also picked up the same egg as you? Gray asked puzzledly. One more sentence. Stop bragging, you droopy-eyed guy. No, go forward. Wendy must be hungry. Does she want to eat this egg? Yes, that's it. Ian snapped his fingers and looked at the egg next to Natsu with malicious eyes. It doesn't matter if it's a chicken egg, a duck egg, a goose egg or a dragon egg, as long as it can be eaten, it's a good egg. Natsu, you must be starving to have these strange ideas, so let's roast this egg and eat it. Uncle Ian, are you a devil? Natsu retreated in fear, holding his balls, but soon he bumped into an invisible barrier. Just hand over your balls, Natsu. Ian walked slowly towards Natsu while grinning. Perhaps sensing the approach of danger, the egg in Natsu's hand suddenly began to shake violently. Then, in full view of everyone, a crack appeared on the top of the egg and quickly spread downwards. Click click. 10 seconds later, a blue kitten with a pair of white wings flew out of the egg and lay staggeringly on top of Natsu's head. Love at the same time, the egg in Wendy's arms suddenly cracked, and a pink and white kitten flew out and landed lightly in front of Wendy. Are you my master? Chapter 29. As X778 came to an end, Fairy Tail was about to usher in the annual S-Class Wizard Upgrade Assessment. In preparation for this assessment, everyone has been working hard to complete tasks in recent times, hoping to qualify for the assessment at the last minute. Even Guildarts, who had been on a mission outside and avoiding a certain boss, returned to the guild because of the S-level assessment. And today is the day when Makarov announces the list of people who have qualified for the assessment. When the last ray of sunlight fell, the moonlight sprinkled on the earth. The Fairy Tail Guild was crowded with people. Except for a few people who could not return due to force majeure, almost all members gathered in the guild hall. It's finally here. Macau looked nervous, and Wakaba beside him also lit a cigarette with trembling hands. Amidst everyone's anticipation, Guild President Makarov appeared behind the railing on the second floor, with the guild's only two S-class wizards, Ian and Guildarts, standing behind him. Quiet! Guildarts' loud voice echoed throughout the guild, and the noisy voices below disappeared in an instant. According to Fairy Tail's practice, I will now announce the list of candidates for the S-Class Wizard Upgrade Assessment. Makarov cleared his throat and announced in a loud and clear voice. There was immediate loud cheering from below, and when they quieted down again, Makarov spoke again. This year's assessment venue is still set on Tianlang Island, which is the holy land of our guild. I have carefully observed the abilities and wills of each of you over the past year. There are a total of 6 people participating in the assessment this time. Macau.Conbolt. Hearing his name, Macau waved his fist heavily. He had been waiting for this day to come for a long time. Wakaba mine. Wakaba, who was also selected, was very excited and didn't even notice that the cigarette butt was almost burning to the end. Laxus.Dr. A young man with short yellow hair and a lightning bolt on his left eye stood there with a look of contempt on his face. Behind him stood 2 other young men and a young girl. Urusha Milkovich. Next to Urusha, who had tied her black hair with a white band, smiled confidently. Gus Rowe. Warren Rocco. This is the list of people who have passed the S-Class Wizard Upgrade Assessment. As Makarov announced all the candidates, many of those who were not selected showed disappointed expressions. This time, only one qualified candidate will be selected from the participants. The assessment will be held in a week, so you should all prepare yourself. Makarov paused after he finished speaking, leaving enough time for the guild members below to discuss. After a few minutes, Ian spoke again. Let me explain the rules of the assessment. You will need to find your partner within the next week. There are 2 rules you must follow when choosing a partner. First, the other party must be a member of Fairy Tail. Second, you cannot choose an S-Class wizard as your partner. The details of the exam will be announced to everyone after we arrive at Sirius Island. Guildarts will participate in this S-level assessment as an examiner. As Ian finished speaking, there was a burst of exclamations and noisy discussions from below. Stop complaining. Guildarts also spoke up at this time. This is what people who become S-Class wizards must go through. The 6 selected people and their partners will all gather at Harjan in a week. Over. After announcing the matters related to the S-rank assessment, Makarov and Guildarts left the guild, while Ian stayed. By the way, are the S-level assessments the same every year? Ian's brother. Lisana asked Ian, who was leaning on a chair at the long table. It's pretty much the same. Ian explained with a smile, no matter how the content of the test changes, it is inseparable from the 3 points of strength, spirit, and will. Only when these 3 aspects are recognized by the president and the examiner can you pass the S-level test. Compared to other guilds' S-class exams, Fairy Tail's S-class exams are several levels more difficult, so only a few people can pass them. In fact, the guild hasn't produced a new S-class wizard in many years. Myra Jane and the others who were sitting at the table suddenly understood why there was an S-class assessment every year, but there were only 2 S-class wizards, Ian and Guildarts, in the guild. So the examiner for Guildarts' S-rank exam. Both Arusha and Urza turned their gazes to Ian. Yes, it's me. Ian straightened his chest and said proudly. You are so proud. What is there to be proud of? Lao Deng. Seeing his conspicuous appearance, Arusha couldn't help but cover her face and subconsciously moved away from him. So how old is Uncle Ian? Natsu asked a very unpleasant question at this time, and the scene became quiet in an instant. The next second, he let out a shrill scream. Ian suddenly appeared behind Natsu, clenched his fists, with his index finger knuckles protruding, and drilled into Natsu's temple hard. Don't you know that it is very rude to ask a young man about his age? Hearing Natsu's screams, everyone else couldn't help but wipe the sweat off their foreheads. Arusha even rolled her eyes. At this moment, 4 menacing figures suddenly appeared next to the table where they were. It was Laxus who came over with his personal guard, the Thunder Gods. Arusha, I will definitely defeat you in this S-rank assessment. Laxus stared at Arusha with fighting spirit and declared his victory. However, Arusha just chuckled and said, I will be looking forward to your performance. But before that, you should probably think about what to do if you lose to your own little brother. Although she is a few years younger than Laxus, Arusha is just as powerful as him. However, she is even more sinister than Laxus can be. Bigusro heard what Arusha said and wanted to refute, but was stopped by Laxus. Don't worry about that. Laxus said coldly, then turned his gaze to Ian, after I defeat Guildarts, it will be your turn next. After saying this, he walked away with a proud step. How dare he? Myra glared at Laxus's retreating figure and yelled, Ian, do you want me to help you teach him a lesson? Ian just smiled and shook his head. He was just a rebellious kid, and he would not argue with him, no way. When it comes to being petty, Ian was well known for being petty, even during the era of dragon rule more than 400 years ago. He cast a sharp look at Arusha and drew a line in the air with his right hand at her neck, Nejut. There were several black lines on Arusha's forehead, but she couldn't resist Ian's fixed gaze, so she could only cover her face and nodded in agreement. Chapter 30. Tenro Island, a huge island isolated in the sea, is the holy land of Fairy Tail. Rumor has it that fairies once lived on this island, so it is also called Fairy Island. The island's periphery and the land are filled with powerful magic, so it is not easy to be discovered by the outside world. Its appearance is very special, like 2 islands stacked on top of each other. Above the island is a towering tree with lush branches and leaves that blocks out the sun, below is a 2-layer forest, lush and green, full of mystery. There are many strange creatures living on the island, including some animals and plants that have become extinct in Ishgar. It is rumored that Mavis Vermilion, the first president of Fairy Tail, is buried here. The island also hides the 2 great super magics of Fairy's Glory and Fairy's Ball. For more than 100 years, countless evil-minded black magicians and treasure hunters have tried to find this legendary island, but they all ended up lost in the vast ocean. Only members of the Fairy Tail Guild are allowed to land on this island. At this time, not far from Tianlang Island, a large ship with the emblem of the Fairy Tail Guild was docked on the sea. The sea breeze blew gently, and the ship rose and fell slightly with the waves. The people on the deck stared at Tianlang Island not far away. What a spectacular sight! Macau, Wakaba, and Warren all stared at the nearby Tianlang Island with dull eyes, their jaws almost dropping to the deck. Such a rich magic power! Urusha and Laxus felt the abundant magic power outside of Sirius Island and were secretly amazed. Bigusro stood quietly behind Laxus, playing the role of the younger brother conscientiously. Old man, where are Freed and the others? Laxus suddenly asked with a frown. It turned out that Guildarts had set off for Tianlang Island a day ago with the partners chosen by the 6 people who participated in this S-level assessment. But now that they had arrived at Tianlang Island, there was no trace of the other people. Isn't that it? Makarov pointed to the shore and laughed, with a hint of cunning in his smile. The 6 people looked in the direction of Makarov's finger and found that their partners were standing on a rocky reef on the shore. The details of the assessment are announced below. Makarov continued. This S-class assessment is divided into 3 rounds, which will test your magic power, will, and spiritual level respectively. Only those who pass all of them can be promoted to S-class wizards. As you can see, in the first round, you need to reach the Sirius Island under the full obstruction of the other 5 partners. In this process, you are not allowed to attack each other. Violators will be eliminated directly. The first round of assessment begins. Following Makarov's order, Arusha and the other 6 jumped off the boat at the same time. A large amount of cold air surged from Arusha's feet, and everything she passed turned into a smooth ice surface. She stepped on the ice and slid towards the shore lightly and gracefully. Laxus turned into a yellow lightning and streaked across the sky, crossing half the distance in the blink of an eye, at an astonishing speed. Bigusro, Wakaba, and Macau flew towards the shore on the doll, smoke and fire respectively, but their speed was much slower than that of Arusha and Laxus. Warren, who used telepathic magic, was the last one to come. But he was not completely unprepared. He slowly took out a pair of ice skates from his bag, stepped on them and quickly moved towards the shore along the ice left by Arusha. Seeing the 6 people setting off, the 6 people on the shore also immediately began to act. Urza was the first to launch the attack. She was wearing a gorgeous silver-white armor, and countless blue lightsabers were suspended behind her. As she swung her sword forward, the blue lightsabers shot towards Laxus like raindrops. Tianlun. Liaoluan's sword. Faced with such a dense attack, even Laxus, who turned into lightning, had to stop moving forward. His figure flashed rapidly in the air, dodging those blue lightsabers. With the help of Urza, Ultear quickly surpassed Laxus and temporarily became the first. Magic words, broken. Arusha's lead did not last long, as Laxus' partner, the captain of the Thunder Gods, Fried Justine, attacked her. Fried swung his rapier and wrote a few magic words in the air, and the ice beneath Arusha's feet shattered. Her figure swayed slightly, and she jumped up on the broken ice before falling into the sea, but what greeted her was a sky full of golden light particles. Fairy machine gun. Evergreen waved the fan in his hand, and golden light particles exploded. Fire and smoke immediately enveloped Arusha. Although Urusha rushed out quickly, in just a short while, Laxus had already approached her just a few meters away under Urza's attack. As Laxus and Arusha were blocked one after another, the 4 people from Macau in the back gradually approached them. Magic painting. Cannon. Just as the 6 people were chasing each other and came to about 100 meters away from the shore, Macau, Wakaba and Warren's partners finally took action. Litas was seen waving his paintbrush and quickly drawing a huge steel cannon on the drawing board. Immediately, a cannon exactly the same as the one in the painting appeared next to him. Amid the roar of the cannon, the shell drew a perfect arc in the air, passing over Laxus and Arusha in the front, and fell towards Wakaba and Bigusro. The shell was accompanied by a whistling sound, as if it was going to destroy everything. Magic change. Gatling. Wakaba's partner Toka also used his own magic. As the blue magic circle shone, a huge Gatling appeared in his hand. All of you, get out of here. As Toka roared, the Gatling gun in her hand also began to roar. Blue flames kept flashing, and bullets poured out like a rainstorm, even Wakaba was included in her attack range. This crazy woman. Wakaba couldn't help but curse inwardly, but he didn't dare to pause for the moment. Because Toka's attacks were too intense, even Laxus and Arusha were unable to move forward for a while. Glorious glory! Just when everyone thought they had to wait until Toka's magic power was exhausted before they could move forward, Arusha suddenly threw out a crystal ball, and dozens of beams of light shot out and exploded under Toka's feet. The rocky reef was instantly shattered by her magic, and Toka was thrown far away by the impact of the explosion. Her figure drew an arc in the air and fell into the dense forest on the island. I will definitely come back. Hearing Toka's increasingly distant declaration of defeat, Macau and the others couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat from their foreheads. But only Laxus realized something, and after a second of hesitation, he immediately rushed towards Urza. It was not until a fierce battle broke out between Laxus and Urza that the 4 Macau finally realized that Makarov only forbade the 6 of them to attack each other, but did not forbid them to attack the other 5 partners. Before Macau and Warren could take any action, Litas and Nab, who had not yet taken action, turned into 2 lifelike ice sculptures standing on the shore. Chapter 31. Just when Fairy Tale's S-level assessment was in full swing. Deep in the heart of Tianlang Island, in a thatched hut behind a stone house, a huge magic crystal stood on a circular platform. Inside the crystal, a beautiful woman was sleeping with her eyes closed, like a sleeping beauty. This magic crystal has been here for more than 100 years. Despite the passage of time and the change of seasons, it has not changed at all. But today, the day of Fairy Tale's annual S-level assessment, a tiny crack suddenly appeared on the top of the magic crystal, and the crack slowly spread like a spider web, and the eyes of the sleeping woman in the crystal seemed to tremble slightly. At the same time, in the distant Magnolia, Ian looked back towards the sea with a sense of something. His gaze was deep and far-reaching, as if he had traveled through space and saw the changes on the magic crystal. On the coast, the fierce fight between Urza and Laxus has not stopped. Although Makarov did not force them to stop a few people from landing on the island in order to help their teammates pass, and also informed them of the hidden rules in advance, Urza did not choose to retreat just because of Laxus's aggressive approach, but chose to face him head-on. Change to black feather armor. Seeing Laxus getting closer and closer, Urza immediately changed into black armor with a white cross and a pair of bat-like wings on the back. She turned into a stream of light and rushed straight towards Laxus. The long sword in her hand drew a cross-shaped slash in the air, and the sword light was like the moon, extremely sharp. Black feather moon flash. However, Laxus was faster than her. A flash of lightning passed by, and Urza's slash was actually split by a bolt of lightning. Then, golden lightning suddenly burst out, and the lightning turned into a spear and pierced Urza's chest. As the lightning flashed, a burning smell filled the air. Urza, who had no time to dodge, immediately put on the Thunder Emperor armor that could increase resistance to lightning, and used the tip of the lightning spear to block the lightning spear thrown by Laxus. Violent Volt. Seeing that Urza actually blocked his attack, Laxus raised his right hand high and clenched it fiercely. The lightning spear suddenly turned into a series of rapid electric currents, which quickly spread along the lightning spear to Urza's arm and flowed through her body. Although the Thunder Emperor armor helped Urza improve her resistance to lightning, facing Laxus, who was much stronger than her, the powerful current still passed through the armor and paralyzed her whole body. Lightning pressure. Just when Laxus was about to kill Urza with one move, Ultear's giggle interrupted his magic. If he doesn't stop, he'll be eliminated. Laxus turned his head and his cold gaze fell on Urusha, who was smiling not far away. While he was fighting Urza, Bigusro was stepped on by Urusha, and half of his body turned into an ice sculpture. Fried and Evergreen could only watch helplessly, not daring to take a single step forward. Not only that, even Macau, Wakaba and Warren have turned into ice sculptures to accompany Lidens and Nab. It was only then that Laxus understood all the hidden rules of this round of assessment. The so-called prohibition of attacking each other is limited to the distance from the boat to the shore, and their partners are not within the restriction of not attacking each other. Don't worry about me, Laxus, you must become an S-class wizard. Bigusro, with his head still outside, shouted at Laxus, his voice full of determination and trust. Urusha looked at Laxus with a smile, but she had no intention of telling Bigusro to shut up. A trace of struggle flashed across Laxus's face, but he finally released the magic in his hand. And Urusha let go of Bigusro as promised. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. With the help of Fried and Evergreen, Bigusro, whose hands and feet were frozen stiff, came to Laxus and lowered his head in shame. I didn't save you so you can waste your time feeling guilty. Laxus said coldly, if you want to keep up with me, then work hard to improve your strength. Fried and Evergreen looked at Laxus in admiration. This was the person they followed, strong and gentle. On the other side, Urza, who had recovered from the paralysis, also stood up from the ground. She looked at Laxus's profile with fighting spirit, and was not frustrated by this failure. After all, both she and Laxus still had many cards to reveal. At this moment, Makarov also came to the shore while steering the boat. He stood at the bow and looked at Urusha with a satisfied smile on his face. Congratulations on passing the first round of assessment. This round not only tests your magic power, but also your ability to analyze and deal with unknown situations. Makarov said softly, sometimes, powerful strength cannot solve all problems. You also need a calm mind to help you think. Laxus snorted coldly, obviously a little unconvinced. Makarov saw this but didn't say anything more. The next second round of assessment will be conducted by Gildarts. He is waiting for you in the forest behind. Urusha and Laxus's eyes crossed in the air, and fierce sparks burst out. Then the three groups that passed the test followed Makarov's instructions and went to the location of the second round of tests. A few minutes later, in a clearing in the forest, they saw Gildarts. "I saw your fight just now. The young people nowadays are really amazing." Gildarts looked at the 6 people and smiled with satisfaction. There was a hint of admiration in his voice, as if he was pleased with the performance of these young people. "However, S-class wizards are not as simple as you think." Suddenly, he changed the subject, and a vast sea of magic power emanated from his body. The magic power that had almost condensed into substance turned into a beam of light that shot up into the sky. The powerful force even caused the Sirius Island to tremble. The ground trembled slightly under the pressure of the magic power, and the surrounding trees were also rustled by the force. Under this heavy pressure, Ursha, Laxus, and Urza immediately fell to their knees, using only their hands to support their bodies. Bigusro and the other 2 were even more unbearable, and they fell directly to the ground. "Is this guy so strong?" A hint of horror appeared in Laxus' eyes. Urusha and Urza also showed a look of horror on their faces, but what they thought was much deeper than Laxus. Gildarts was already so strong, so how strong would Ian's true strength be? Second round of the S-level assessment. "You will pass if you get the bell from me. During this process, I will not use any magic except for magical oppression." Gildarts said coldly, "A reminder, the closer you are to me, the stronger the oppression will be. If you don't want to turn into a pool of meat paste, give up as soon as possible. Don't joke around." Laxus stood up slowly under tremendous pressure. His eyes were as sharp as knives, staring at Gildarts intently. "I will definitely surpass you and become the strongest person in the guild." He staggered towards Gildarts, leaving deep footprints with every step. His body trembled slightly, beads of sweat oozed from his forehead, but his eyes remained unwavering. Ultear and Urza also stood up slowly. Compared to Laxus, who was physically stronger, they could only consume more magic power to resist the pressure brought by Gildarts. Their faces were pale, their breathing was rapid, but their eyes were burning with unyielding fighting spirit. Magic words, "Fly." Freed, lying on the ground, wrote a few magic words in the air with trembling fingers, and then let out a final roar with all his strength. "Go ahead, Laxus, and become an S-class wizard." With Freed's help, Laxus suddenly felt his body lighten. Although he couldn't fly normally like usual, he was able to move forward a little faster. Additional, all attributes are improved, resistance is improved. High-level additional gravity field. High-level addition, magic power boost. With Urza's best efforts, a strong magical power flowed into Urusha's body, helping her relieve the pressure caused by the rapid consumption of magical power. At the same time, the change in gravity also made her body lighter, and she quickly caught up with Laxus in front. The 2 of them walked towards Gildarts step by step under increasing pressure, and their footprints on the ground became deeper and deeper. As Gildarts' magic power continued to converge, even their breathing became much more difficult. Finally, the 2 men knelt down again less than 5 steps away from Gildarts. Huff, huff. Urusha and Laxus were panting heavily, beads of sweat dripping from their foreheads, soaking the ground beneath them. Their bodies were shaking slightly, as if they would collapse at any moment. Seeing that the 2 could do this, Gildarts' eyes flashed with satisfaction, but he still planned to continue to stimulate them. "Is that all? If you don't have the determination to die and the courage to fight to the death, you don't even have the qualifications to stand by Ian's side." Hearing this, Urusha's breathing suddenly stopped for a moment, but she soon moved. Urusha stood up tremblingly under the pressure, her hair soaked with sweat covering her eyes, making it difficult to see her expression. Her legs kept shaking, but her body never fell down again. "I passed this test." Her voice was not loud, but it revealed her unwavering will. Urusha dragged her trembling legs with difficulty and moved forward step by step. Even though all the muscles and bones in her body were crying out in pain, she did not stop. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps finally, under Gildarts' praising gaze, Urusha took the bell from Gildarts' hand. The next second, she lost consciousness and fell heavily to the ground. Fortunately, Gildarts reacted quickly, withdrawing his magic power and leaning over to catch her. Chapter 32. When Urusha woke up, there was already a full moon in the sky. The moonlight was pouring down like water, and the leaves were swaying gently in the breeze, making rustling sounds. The entire Tianlang Island seemed to be shrouded in a silver-white halo. "Woke up." Hearing the voice, Urusha looked to the side. Gildarts was sitting on a rock with a smile on his face, his hands casually resting on his knees, looking at her gently. She looked around, and saw no one else except the two of them. The surrounding woods seemed particularly quiet under the moonlight, and occasionally a few low roars of unknown monsters broke the silence of the night. I haven't completely passed the S-level assessment yet, right? After sorting out her thoughts, the smart Urusha immediately analyzed the situation at hand. You're much quicker than I was back then. Gildarts praised, and then he explained, the third round of assessment is not necessary. Even if you choose to give up, you can still be promoted to an S-class wizard. Urusha fell into deep thought, and Gildarts did not disturb her, but just waited quietly for her decision. Will everyone who passes the S-level assessment go through this choice? Urusha suddenly asked. Ian once said that physical objects may be destroyed, but the imprint of the spirit will forever exist in the long river of history. Gildarts said softly, with a hint of emotion in his tone, he hopes that people can remember history, and not just regard the S-level assessment as a way to get promoted. It's hard to imagine that old man could say such a thing. Urusha complained. The corners of her mouth slightly raised. She slowly stood up and patted the dust off her body. Her calm eyes had already told Gildarts her answer. Go through this forest, and you will find the resting place of the first president of Fairy Tale. Once you reach there, your assessment will be complete. After Gildarts announced the tasks for the third round of assessment, he looked around like a thief, then suddenly came close to Urusha and whispered something in a low voice. The president hired someone to guard the first president's grave all year round. If you count the time, she should be an old lady in her 30s. You must not make her angry, otherwise the consequences will be serious. Seeing Gildarts' frightened look, Urusha couldn't help but be on high alert. Although she wasn't worried that the guardian would really do anything to her, if she did something embarrassing, wouldn't Grey laugh at her for the rest of her life? At this moment, both Makarov on the boat and Zara in the stone house under the serious tree couldn't help but sneeze several times in succession. The weather has started to get colder recently. Zara, are you catching a cold? The blonde girl asked with concern as she sat on a chair, shaking her white and tender feet. The brown-haired girl rolled her eyes, not wanting to answer such a stupid question. She is a magician, a powerful one at that. How could she catch a cold so easily? Meanwhile, Urusha, who had heard a lot of gossip from Gildarts, was on her way. She kept moving forward along the path in the forest, the silvery moonlight shining through the treetops, casting mottled shadows, covering the earth with a veil, and also illuminating her way forward. I don't know how much time has passed, when the bright full moon in the sky slowly sank into the horizon. In the far east, a ray of morning light was gradually rising. Urusha, who had reached the end of the road, finally saw a house made of stone, and a thatched hut stood behind the house. Although Urusha could not see the objects in the hut because the entrance was blocked by the house, she guessed that it was probably the tombstone of the first President Mavis. Just as she was hesitating whether she should visit the Guardian first or go directly to pay homage to the first president, a barefoot blonde girl skipped out of the stone house. Urusha was stunned. This was different from what Gildarts said. Could this be the daughter of that old lady? But didn't Gildarts say that she had brown hair? But just as Urusha was stunned, a brown-haired girl who was very similar to the one Gildarts described walked out of the house. Mavis, you went out without shoes again. The brown-haired girl's voice contained a hint of blame, but more of concern. Seeing the two people gradually going away, Urusha was about to step forward to greet them, but she heard an unexpected name. Mavis? Isn't that the name of the first president? In an instant, all the hairs on Urusha's body stood up, and a chill gradually spread through her heart. Looking at the two figures in the distance becoming increasingly blurred in the mist, she became more and more certain of her guess. Can't see me, can't see me, can't see me. Just as Urusha kept praying in her heart and slowly backed away, the thing she feared most happened. The blonde girl in the mist seemed to sense something and suddenly looked back, just in time to see Urusha retreating into the forest. Zara, look, is there someone over there? Mavis happily interrupted Zara's chatter, pointing in the direction of Urusha with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. The brown-haired girl also looked back and saw Urusha standing there stiffly, not daring to move. What's wrong with her? Why doesn't she move? Zara seemed a little confused, her brows slightly furrowed, with a hint of confusion in her eyes. But just as they turned around and were about to go back, Urusha suddenly screamed, turned around and ran all the way into the forest. Her movements were quick and panic, as if she had seen something terrible. Her sudden scream also scared Zara and Mavis, who were already confused, and became even more bewildered. More than half an hour later, Zara and Mavis, who had captured Arusha, were shocked when they heard the reason why she ran away. It was only then that Arusha realized that she had been tricked by Gildarts. The Gildarts you're talking about should be the wizard who passed the S-class assessment more than 20 years ago. Mavis couldn't help laughing again when she mentioned Gildarts, especially when she thought of him saying that Zara was already an old lady in her 30s. Zara was so angry that veins on his forehead bulged out, that lecherous guy should have been burned to death right then. Arusha secretly gave Zara a thumbs up in her heart, and was furious at Gildarts for deceiving her. Under Mavis's comfort, Zara finally stopped accusing Gildarts of crimes. The two turned their attention to Arusha, who had been sitting aside with a blank expression since she knew she had been deceived. You smell like a teacher. Zara crossed her arms over her chest and looked at Arusha with a scrutinizing gaze. She did not notice the ambiguity in her words. Several black lines suddenly appeared on Arusha's forehead. Don't make me sound like a mistress who's trying to steal someone's girl, hey. Without a doubt, Ian was the only person she knew who was qualified to be called a teacher by Zara and Mavis. After meeting Ian, who claimed to be over 1,000 years old, Arusha found it hard to associate Mavis and Zara, who were only over 100 years old and looked like teenage girls, with the two legendary guild founders. Especially after the other party had seen his embarrassing behavior and said this ambiguous statement. Destroy, I'm tired. The attentive Mavis seemed to notice Arusha's embarrassment. She smiled slightly, stood up, and motioned Arusha to follow her. The two men walked around the stone house and came to the front of the thatched hut. Go ahead, and after I see what's inside, I'll tell you what you want to know. Mavis said softly. Arusha walked into the hut with a suspicious attitude. Inside was a circular platform with a huge magic crystal standing on the platform. It seemed that there was a person sealed inside. But when she saw clearly the appearance of the person in the magic crystal, her pupils suddenly contracted as if she had seen something incredible. Chapter 33. While Arusha was immersed in shock, Urza, who was also tossing and turning and unable to fall asleep, left the room and came to the deck on the shore of Tenro Island. Feeling the coolness brought by the sea breeze, Urza looked at the quiet Tenro Island in the night, with a myriad of thoughts in his mind. Ever since she came to Sirius Island, she has been feeling somewhat uneasy, as if something in the depths of Sirius Island was attracting her. But she didn't tell anyone about this, and suppressed the urge to go and investigate, because she had a strong premonition that if she uncovered this mystery now, it might cause extremely serious consequences. It was not until the sun was high in the sky, Ultear, who had passed the S-rank assessment, returned to the ship, Makarov announced his departure to return to the guild, and the strong attraction of Sirius Island gradually disappeared, that Urza was finally able to return to the cabin and sleep peacefully. With the end of the fairy tale S-class wizard upgrade assessment, the year X778 finally came to an end. With the ringing of the New Year's bell, the year X779 arrived with everyone's celebration. But on the first day of the new year, Gildarts did a big job for everyone. What did you say? Kana is your daughter. Wakaba was so shocked when he heard the news that he didn't even notice that his pipe fell to the ground. How could you have a daughter? Macau's first reaction was disbelief. Everyone looked at Gildarts, then at Kana, who was standing silently by the side. But even if they stared till their eyes dried, they couldn't tell that the two looked like a father and daughter. The incident happened an hour ago. When Ian was heading to the guild, he happened to see Kana standing at the door of the Gildarts' house, hesitating and not daring to knock. Seeing this, Ian, who knew the reason, pulled the confused Kana without saying a word and kicked open the door of the Gildarts' house under her horrified gaze. Lao Ji, I've brought your daughter to you. Ian used the simplest and most brutal method to help Kana solve the problem that had been bothering her for a long time. I can testify to this. Ian was leaning on the railing on the second floor at this time, looking like he was enjoying the fun. Although Gildarts is an absolute pervert, Kana is definitely his daughter. Am I going too far? Gildarts smiled bitterly, but the guilt in his heart prevented him from saying any words of defense. Gildarts was surprised to suddenly have a daughter, but he was also happy and guilty. Especially after learning that Kana's mother Cornelia had passed away, he was determined to give all his love to Kana to make up for the years of debt. As if she had noticed his thoughts, Kana, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke. I don't need any compensation from you. If it weren't for Ian, I wouldn't have known you. Kana said insincerely. She tried to put on a proud and indifferent attitude, not wanting to disrupt Gildart's life because of her own reasons. Although I am your daughter, I am also a wizard of fairy tale. Gildarts felt very relieved to see her determination, but he soon stopped laughing. After Makarov announced a banquet to celebrate the reunion of Gildarts and Kana, Gildarts felt dizzy when he saw Kana skillfully holding a barrel and began to drink. He wanted to skin the BD who taught Kana to drink and tore him into pieces. Wakaba, who was watching Kana drinking in Macau and cheering on the side, suddenly felt an inexplicable chill rising from the soles of his feet. One day, Ian was walking down the street when he suddenly sensed a powerful magical force brewing in the sky above the suburb of Magnolia. Magnolia, which was clear and sunny 1 second ago, suddenly became cloudy and cloudy the next second, with lightning and thunder, just like the prelude to a storm. Avoiding the people on the street who were rushing home to collect their clothes, Ian quickly headed towards the suburbs. Is this feeling, a soul? Looking at the vortex that was gradually forming in the sky and feeling the magic power in the air constantly flowing towards the vortex, Ian quickly guessed the origin of this vortex. But when he arrived at the bottom of the whirlpool, a young man was already standing there. The boy was handsome, with short sky blue hair and a tattoo on his right eye. If Ursha and Urza were there, they would have been able to call out his name right away. Sign. But Ian knew that the boy in front of him was not the Jalal that Urusha and Urza knew, but the prince of the parallel world Edelas. I saw several magic wands inserted in front of the young man. Driven by magic power, magic circles appeared layer by layer, wrapping the vortex in the sky. Then Jalal inserted the last magic circle into the ground and made a seal with his hands. A stream of purple magic power shot up into the sky and hit the center of the vortex. As magic power continued to be injected, the vortex's rotation speed became slower, and finally disappeared into nothingness. You have been watching for such a long time, don't you have anything to say? After resolving the crisis of the soul, Jalal packed up his wand, turned around and looked at Ian and said coldly. I should be the one asking the question, Prince Jalal of Edelas. When Jalal heard Ian's words, his face suddenly changed. He pulled out the wand that he had just put back behind his back and attacked Ian without saying a word. 5th layer magic circle, Kagura protection. A beam of light came from the sky, but Ian slowly made a few hand seals. Triple magic circle, mirror water. 3 magic circles appeared one after another, and the light beam hit the magic circle. After a stalemate for a while, it suddenly changed direction and shot towards Jalal's position. Jalal could only roll to the side in embarrassment to barely avoid his own magic. You used the magic I left behind against me, Jalal. You should study history well. Ian said jokingly with a smile on his face. Jalal only then noticed that Ian looked familiar. A picture flashed through his mind, and he froze in place as if struck by lightning. The founder of magic, Master Ian Bell. Chapter 34. Ever since the council expelled the Blood Forest at an extremely heavy price, the magic world suddenly fell into an eerie calm. Whether it is the righteous forces led by the council and regular guilds, or the dark forces led by the Balam Alliance, it seems that it will take a long time to repair the trauma they have suffered. Of course, all this had nothing to do with Fairy Tail. After all, in the last crusade, Fairy Tail, Lamia Scale and Blue Pegasus escaped unscathed, with only Phantom's ruler suffering heavy damage. As compensation, the council not only awarded the new president José Porla the title of 10 Wizard Saints after the crusade, but also gave Phantom a series of other compensations. With the secret help and support of the council, Phantom quickly recovered and even became stronger than before. Gajil the Iron Dragon, Todomaru the new fire element, and Juvia the Rain Girl all became famous, and together with veteran S-class wizards Arya the Sky and Soul the Earth, Spectre became the most popular, and José Porla's ambitions began to expand. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye, and a lot of things happened to Fairy Tail during these 5 years. In X779, Laxus, who had unfortunately failed in the last S-class assessment, made a comeback and finally successfully defeated Urza, becoming an S-class wizard after Ultear. It was as if to make up for the debt owed by Fairy Tail for more than 20 years. After Urusha and Laxus, Urza and Myra Jane also passed the S-class examination in the next 2 years and became S-class wizards. Even the mysterious boy who always covered his face with a hat and a mask and whom Ian picked up from somewhere quietly walked ahead of Natsu and others in X782 and successfully passed the S-level assessment. And with Ian's interference, the soul of the Beast King, which should have interrupted Myra's path as a wizard, failed to cause much trouble. Myra Jane, who obtained the power of the 5 demons that surpassed the soul of Satan, easily defeated the soul of the Beast King and helped Elfman complete the reception, facing those fists as big as casseroles. No matter how powerful Chopin was, he could not play out the sadness of the soul of the Beast King. In the past 5 years, Ian had not heard any news about Ulysses Young, nor had he heard of any large-scale disappearance or death. Ever since the battle in the council, it was as if the other party had suddenly disappeared from this world. As the wheel of time passed through the year X783, the gears of fate began to turn again. X784, Harjan Port. You stinky uncle, you only gave me 1,000 gold. The blonde girl angrily walked on the busy street, with little flames on her head. Is my charm only worth 1,000 gold? No, if Sister Lucy dresses up well, she will definitely be prettier than the cover girl of Magic Weekly. The blue-haired loli who was holding a white cat beside the girl said seriously. Lucy felt like an arrow had pierced her heart, and couldn't help but complain, so even Wendy thinks my current outfit is terrible. Seeing Lucy fall into depression because of her words, Wendy wanted to explain but didn't know how to start, fearing that she would say the wrong thing and cause a second blow to Lucy. She was so anxious that tears were about to fall, and she could only look for help at the white-haired young man with his hands behind his head. Brother Ian. Lucy. Hearing Ian speak, Lucy looked at him with tears in her eyes, hoping to get his comfort. However, Wendy doesn't mean that your appearance is bad, but that you lack some femininity. Phew. Lucy, who was stabbed in the chest again, felt that her life had become much darker at this moment. She felt like she had lost her soul, and she kept muttering something. Badly dressed, not feminine. Badly dressed, not feminine. This guy's personality is still as bad as ever. Carla wiped the sweat off her forehead in Wendy's arms and complained silently in her heart. She still hasn't forgotten the prank Ian played on her when she was just born. The words "Are you my master?" were almost becoming her nightmare. Brother Ian. Seeing that Ian not only did not help comfort Lucy, but even stabbed her again, Wendy puffed up her cheeks and glared at him. Her cute look almost melted Ian's heart. He patted Wendy's little head, then suddenly pointed to the side and shouted, "Lucy, look who that is. Your way of changing the subject is really stiff and perfunctory." Lucy complained, but she still looked in the direction Ian pointed, and she really saw 2 figures that surprised her, Natsu, Happy. In the restaurant, Natsu and Happy were wolfing down their food like starving ghosts. The plates on the table had almost piled up into a small mountain. I told you a long time ago, if you don't have money to eat, just look at Happy. Ian sat opposite Natsu and said jokingly, if it's just for food reserves, I believe Happy can do it. Are you the devil? Natsu and Lucy looked at Ian in horror, while Wendy nervously hugged Carla tightly in her arms, with such force that Carla almost suffocated. I don't think I'm up to it. Happy said with tears streaming down her face. You have to have confidence in yourself, Happy. Ian grinned and gave Happy a thumbs up, but his words made Happy's heart go cold. She burst into tears and threw herself into Natsu's arms. Natsu, I don't want to be a reserve ration. Don't worry, Happy, you are my most important friend. Even if you are really roasted by Ian, I won't eat it. Natsu said seriously, but his words were like a sharp knife stabbing Happy's already scarred heart. That's too much. Happy, who had suffered consecutive blows, could only turn his grief and anger into appetite and started to wolf down the food on the plate again. By the way, why did Natsu and Happy come to Harjan as well? Lucy asked curiously, supporting her chin. I came here specially because I heard that the fire dragon would come to this city. I didn't expect that guy to be not Igneel at all. Natsu said while swallowing the food in big mouthfuls. His full mouth did not affect his speech at all. That person also said there would be a party on the boat tonight, Happy added. A drop of cold sweat immediately rolled down the foreheads of Lucy, Wendy, and Carla. They looked at Natsu and Happy as if they were idiots. How could a real dragon appear in the city? Are you idiots? Lucy complained loudly. Natsu and Happy immediately sat there with their eyes wide open in shock. Forget it, we should leave soon, just enjoy your meal. Lucy covered her forehead. She knew it would be hard to explain the matter of Igneel to Natsu. Considering that she still had a commission to complete, she decided to leave. But as soon as they reached the door, they saw the shocked expression of the waiter and turned back subconsciously. But this turn left an indelible shadow on her. Thank you for your hospitality, Lady Lucy. Natsu and Happy prostrated themselves before Lucy, and Lucy's toes almost dug into the floor out of embarrassment in front of everyone. "Don't call me by my name, it's so embarrassing." Feeling the gazes from all around, Lucy wished there was a crack in the ground for her to crawl into. In order to prevent Natsu and Happy from making more radical moves, she dragged Wendy and ran out of the hotel as if she was running for her life. Chapter 35. That guy, I will teach him a lesson when we get back to the guild. Lucy finally stopped after running through several streets. She panted and gritted her teeth. "But it seems like you can't beat the fire dragon." Carla rolled her eyes and shattered Lucy's fantasy with facts. "Even if you know, don't say it," Lucy yelled. Then she sighed. She may have suffered more blows in just a few hours than in the past day. "Destroy, I'm tired." Lucy, exhausted both physically and mentally, thought darkly. "Haven't you noticed yet?" At this moment, Ian suddenly spoke. Lucy and Wendy looked at him in confusion, but only Carla seemed to react. "Natsu, fire dragon." Ian gave a slight hint. Natsu wasn't in Harjan before, but he heard from others that the fire dragon would appear here. Lucy and Wendy were stunned for a second before they suddenly realized. In recent years, as young wizards in the guild have emerged, Natsu has also made a name for himself in the magic world, Fire Dragon. But when the real Natsu didn't even know he was coming to Harjan, there were already rumors that a fire dragon would appear in Harjan. Obviously, someone is impersonating Fairy Tail and using Natsu's name to do evil. Could this incident be related to the recent frequent disappearances of young girls? Carla guessed. "If you want to know the answer, why not go and see it for yourself?" Ian chuckled. "That party!" Lucy, Wendy, and Carla shouted in unison. "But," Lucy suddenly showed a difficult expression on her face, "wouldn't it be too obvious if we had so many people? Should we send a bait first?" As soon as she finished speaking, the eyes of the two people and the cat fell on her at the same time. "Is it still me?" Lucy said with tears in her eyes after she came to her senses. She regretted why she said such a thing. "I'm a man and Carla is a cat. If the other party is really the culprit behind the series of disappearances of young girls, they obviously won't be interested in us. You don't want Wendy to take the risk, do you?" Ian spread his hands and said as a matter of course. Lucy burst into tears and wanted to take back what she had said, but there was no medicine for regret in this world. Night time. Lucy, dressed in a gorgeous dress, followed a row of girls at the port and boarded a cruise ship. With a loud whistle, the cruise ship slowly left the port. "Brother Ian, is Sister Lucy really safe?" About 100 meters above the cruise ship, Wendy was suspended in the air with the help of Carla, and asked Ian with a worried look on her face. Don't be fooled by Lucy's fussiness and inexperienced manner, or her tendency to complain all the time. But if you underestimate her, you will pay the price, Ian said with a smile. "I wouldn't thank you even if you said that." Lucy's unpleasant voice sounded in their minds. Ian had anticipated this situation when Lucy and Wendy received the commission, so before leaving Magnolia, he copied the telepathic conversation magic from Warren. "If you get exposed because of your addiction to complaining, I won't save you," Ian said jokingly. "Ian, you must have been a devil in your previous life." Hearing these words squeezed out from Lucy's teeth, Wendy and Carla could even imagine her crazy look now. "Be bold, maybe I am a devil in the eyes of the devil," Ian teased. Lucy was choked and speechless. She had never seen such a black-hearted guy who was so proud of it. However, in order to avoid being exposed, she suppressed her urge to complain and temporarily cut off contact with Ian. At the same time, at Harjan Harbor, Natsu and Happy, who heard from several passers-by that Fairy Tail's fire dragon was holding a party on the ship, also rushed towards the cruise ship at full speed. On the cruise ship, Lucy's beautiful appearance and noble temperament quickly attracted the attention of the so-called fire dragon. "Lucy, is that so?" The man with dark blue hair and a purple cloak brought Lucy to a room in the cabin and opened a bottle of red wine that looked very valuable. He smoothed his hair in a coquettish manner, then snapped his fingers. "It's such a wonderful night, why don't we have a drink first?" His voice is gentle and magnetic, making people indulge in it. But Lucy, who was prepared, slapped the drink he handed over and said, "You just used charm and sleep, right? These are magics that were banned from sale by the council several years ago. What is your purpose? You know a lot." The man who was exposed was not panicked. Instead, he touched his chin with a smile, and the two rings on his index and middle fingers flashed a glimmer. Don't you think the ship is too quiet now? It was only then that Lucy noticed that the deck, which had been noisy before, was now silent. Then the man clapped his hands, and the curtains in the room were drawn open. Dozens of burly men came out carrying the unconscious girls with lewd smiles on their faces. The recent series of missing girls are indeed your fault. Lucy frowned and said in a cold voice. Welcome to my ship. Before we reach Bosnia, I advise you to behave yourself. The man had an evil smile on his face, and he didn't seem to worry at all that Lucy could escape from the cruise ship. However, just as the man and his accomplices were feeling smug, Lucy suddenly pulled out a golden key from her waist and inserted it into the red wine bottle on the table. Open, Aquarius Gate, Aquarius. The emerald green magic circle suddenly lit up, and along with a sound like the ticking of a clock, a beautiful mermaid emerged from the magic circle and hovered above the wine bottle. Damn it, it's actually a wizard. In that case, I can't let you go. The man's face changed slightly when he saw Lucy summon a celestial spirit. But before he could do anything, something happened that shocked everyone. If you dare to summon in the bottle again, I will kill you. Aquarius's sharp eyes exuded a murderous aura, and Lucy was so scared that she immediately shrank her head. Sorry. Then Aquarius turned her gaze to the man and his accomplice beside her. A cold light flashed in her aqua blue eyes. She raised the water bottle in her hand high and then swung it down. A huge wave of tens of meters high suddenly rose from the calm sea surface, and the cruise ship, which was tens of meters long, looked extremely small under the huge wave. Under the impact of the huge wave, the people and the ship were washed towards Harjan port. Natsu and Happy, who were rushing towards the cruise ship, were unlucky and were hit head-on by the huge wave and were swept in together. Ian, who had flown to a higher place the moment the waves rose, smiled slightly when he saw this scene. It seems that we don't need to take any action. Chapter 36. At the coast, Lucy lay on the beach in a daze. When she came to her senses, she looked at the row of houses destroyed by the waves, and suddenly a feeling of sadness came over her. That's too much! Lucy shouted at Aquarius. Tisk, I accidentally washed away the boat as well. Aquarius said coldly. Lucy's forehead showed a few well signs, and just when she was about to complain, Ian and Wendy fell from the air. Long time no see, Aquarius. Lord Ian. Facing an ancient being like Ian, Aquarius did not dare to be as presumptuous as he did with Lucy. She bowed respectfully. Lord Layla asked me to say hello to you on her behalf. Ian nodded, then smiled and gave Lucy a thumbs up. As expected of you, you are the wizard of fairy tale. Lucy burst into tears. Her wallet. I thought that the task issued by the Council of Representatives could improve the economy. But I didn't expect that not only did it fail to improve the economy, but it also made the poor families even worse off. Aquarius, you have to pay me my commission. But Aquarius not only ignored Lucy's request, but also stabbed her broken heart again. Don't call me next week, I'm going on a trip with my boyfriend. Boyfriend. After saying that, Aquarius turned into a large amount of bubbles and disappeared. This time Lucy cried even louder. Wendy's cheeks turned red with anxiety, but she didn't know how to comfort her. In the end, it was Ian who had to step in. Can't you find a scapegoat? Ian said angrily. You've been with me for so long, and you haven't learned such a simple thing. Lucy's crying suddenly stopped. Scapegoat. I just saw Natsu and Happy flying towards the cruise ship, but they hit the waves. Ian said with a smile. Seeing Lucy's eyes suddenly lit up, and Wendy and Carla couldn't help but cover their faces and sigh. Okay, another one got lost. At this moment, a raging flame suddenly broke out on the cruise ship lying on the beach. Did you say you are the wizard of fairy tale? Natsu looked at the group of people below the cruise ship with a gloomy expression, his sharp eyes as sharp as a knife. So what? Poor Law, who was already furious because Lucy had ruined her human trafficking operation, saw another fearless person appear out of nowhere, and immediately poured all her anger on Natsu. Get rid of him. A group of human traffickers rushed onto the cruise ship with grins on their faces, and rushed towards Natsu aggressively. However, with just 2 slaps, the 2 people running in the front were blown away by Natsu, and the eyes of the other human traffickers suddenly became much clearer. I'm Natsu from Fairy Tale, and I've never heard of you. Natsu looked down at Poor Law with a gloomy expression, revealing the emblem on his shoulder. Poor Law's little brother was so frightened when he saw this that he trembled in fear. It's true, Master Poor Law. Idiot, don't call my name. Poor Law was almost mad at these stupid subordinates. In order to avoid being wanted by the council, Poor Law, whose identity was exposed, had no choice but to make up her mind to kill Natsu. However, Poor Law, who was just pretending to be Fire Dragon, obviously overestimated his own strength. With just one move, his minions were killed by the fire Natsu spit out, and the remaining half of the row of houses near the beach were also killed. If Poor Law had not reacted quickly and stepped on the flames to rise into the air in time, his fate would probably be the same as those younger brothers, lying on this deep land. Red Flame Rain. Seeing Natsu rushing towards her again with his fists wrapped in flames, Poor Law quickly fired a large number of purple flame magic bullets at him. But he was like a skilled human figure outliner. Even though Natsu rushed straight towards him without any hesitation, the fire bombs just passed by Natsu without causing any harm or even any hindrance to him. Fire Dragon's Claw. Natsu leaped up with a large amount of flames erupting from his feet, then turned over and kicked Poor Law back to the ground. It must be said that Poor Law is quite capable, as he has been able to traffic in human beings for such a long time without being caught. It would be difficult for a normal wizard to stand up again after such a heavy blow. But Poor Law just crawled out of the ruins in a somewhat embarrassed manner, and he came to the air again in shock and anger. This time he no longer had any reservations and directly used his strongest magic. Hellfire. Purple flames shot out like lasers, hitting the edge of the town center and then swept horizontally under Poor Law's control. The powerful force instantly plowed a gully dozens of meters long on the ground. But as a fire dragon slayer, this level of flames obviously cannot hurt Natsu and can only become his nourishment. Then Natsu lightly touched his fists together, and an orange magic circle appeared. He pushed his feet hard and rushed towards Poor Law like a giant dragon. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. The fist wrapped in flames hit Poor Law's face heavily. In an instant, he flew out like a cannonball, smashed several buildings and crashed into the big bell on the top of the church. Then his eyes opened and he fell into coma. Well done, Natsu. After the battle, Ian landed next to Natsu with Lucy and Wendy. He praised with a smile, but Natsu just laughed and didn't notice the malicious look on his and Lucy's lips. Wendy and Carla didn't know what to say after seeing this scene. They could only mourn for Natsu in their hearts for a moment. Who made him be targeted by two devils? But, Ian changed the subject. You may be handsome, but you've gone too far. Ian pointed to the almost completely destroyed Harjanport and said righteously. Natsu's smile froze and a look of panic crept onto his face. Ian, let's run. Natsu and Happy looked around in panic, fearing that the council's army would come out from somewhere and arrest them in the next second. At this time, Lucy put her hand on Natsu's shoulder with a heavy expression. Natsu, there are too many people who saw the battle at the port. Even if we run away now, the council will find the guild. You don't want the president to be captured by the council because of us, do you? Natsu was suddenly as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He didn't want to be caught by the council and lectured, nor did he want to cause trouble for the president. Just when Natsu was about to scratch his scalp bald, Ian and Lucy looked at each other, and the corners of their mouths curled up. Well, you leave first. I'll stay and help you deal with the inquiries from the kingdom army. Lucy said to Natsu with a sad face, I'm the eldest daughter of the Hartfilia family. They won't make things too difficult for me. At this moment, Lucy looked like an angel, kind and holy in the eyes of Natsu and Happy. But they never expected that this angel would turn out to be black when cut open. Shortly after Natsu and Happy left, the kingdom's army responsible for protecting Harjan finally arrived. Lucy sold out Natsu without any hesitation, and also framed Natsu for the row of buildings destroyed by the waves created by Aquarius. Natsu, who was completely unaware of this, had not yet realized that he might not even have a problem eating in the next few months. The 37th Council of Era. After experiencing the last devastating disaster, the rebuilt council strengthened the construction of protective magic. They even moved the transmitter of supertime and space destructive magic, magic elf power into the rebuilt council. In the dim meeting room, there was only a huge magic circle shining with blue light. The congressmen stood in a corner of the magic circle, either in their real bodies or in their mental bodies. Those idiots from Fairy Tale have caused a big disaster again. As Speaker Crawford was absent, the meeting was chaired by the second counselor, Og. He looked at the report in his hand and said with a headache. This time, more than half of the port was destroyed. It's really getting too much. Senator Belluno also felt a little brain congestion when he saw the report. It seems that the girl from the Hartfilia family is also involved this time. Reggie rubbed his buzzing temples. Thinking of the generous man, he also felt that this matter was quite tricky. It is said that Ian Bell and the Sky Witch were also present at the time. Newly elected councillor, Zikrane of 10 Wizard Saints, said with a smile. He is a handsome young man with a tattoo on his right eye and short sky blue hair. As a side note, there is actually an ill-fated relationship between Ian and Zikaline. In the ranking of mages who want to be boyfriends evaluated by Magic Weekly, Zikrane ranked first due to his handsome looks and strong strength, and Ian ranked second. It's not that Ian is not as good as Zikrane. It's because in people's impression, Fairy Tail's ability to get into trouble is far more deeply rooted in people's minds than their appearance and abilities. In addition, apart from hearsay, people have never seen Ian in any magazine interviews. Therefore, compared to Zikrane, who has the status of a congressman, Ian is naturally at a disadvantage in terms of popularity. Back to the council meeting. Chi Ian's words made the entire conference room quiet. Except for Senator Michelot and new Senator Zikrane, who had been expelled from the council by a collective vote of Speaker Crawford and other members, the other members witnessed the battle that destroyed the council 7 years ago. Regardless of Ian's unfathomable strength, the council members must also give him a debt of gratitude for saving the council. This is also the reason why the council has been so tolerant of Fairy Tail, who has been causing trouble for 7 years. Ahem, regarding the handling of the Fairy Tail Guild in this Harjanport incident, I suggest that we follow the procedures. Councilman Yajima spoke at this time. His move was not to target Fairy Tail, but to help them. If after causing such a huge disaster, the council pretends not to see anything and does not impose any punishment on Fairy Tail, it will not only damage the prestige of the council, but will also make Fairy Tail a target of public criticism. The so-called process is the special treatment plan for Fairy Tail that Speaker Crawford personally set 7 years ago. As the second councillor, Ott knew exactly how the process should proceed, and soon a solution for Fairy Tail was developed. Although the cruise ship was still on the sea when Aquarius took action, how could such obvious traces of magic be concealed from the investigation of the council? However, all the congressmen are smart people. Since there are no witnesses to this incident, they will naturally pretend that they have not seen the report. Therefore, Ian, Lucy and Wendy were not punished. As one of the culprits who destroyed Harjanport, Natsu took almost all the fines and had to hand in a 10,000 word apology and letter of guarantee. As for the handling of the Fairy Tail Guild, Duj was a little unsure. As part of the process, whenever Fairy Tail got into trouble, in addition to a light punishment for the perpetrator and requiring Fairy Tail to compensate for the losses, the council would also assign a difficult task to Fairy Tail to appease the grievances of other guilds. However, the council currently does not have any tasks suitable for Fairy Tail. I received the investigation report from the Moon Knights. Councilman Hogg suddenly spoke at this time. The Crescent Knights once found traces of Tartaros activities near Galuna Island. His words immediately caused the other members to gasp. Tartaros? Didn't the Crescent Knights make a mistake? Senator Belluno asked quickly. Hogg immediately took out a photo, which showed a person covered in armor. On the person's chest was the emblem of the Tartaros Guild. Such conclusive evidence also forced other congressmen to believe this terrifying fact. However, the painful price paid for the crusade against the Blood Forest 7 years ago is still vivid in their minds. And now the most mysterious Tartaros in the Balam Alliance Triangle has suddenly started to move, which also makes them feel deeply uneasy. But due to some special reasons, the Moon Island is not under the jurisdiction of the Council or any kingdom. If the Council's troops rashly land on the island, it may cause unnecessary conflicts. Senator Yuli said with a frown. So I suggest that Fairy Tail send someone to Galuna Island to investigate. Hogg said, this can be used as a punishment for Fairy Tail, and it can also help us figure out what Tartaros's purpose is. Second. All MPs, including Ogre, chose to pass Hogg's proposal. Although Yajima still had some doubts in his heart, considering the threat posed by Tartaros, he chose to trust Fairy Tail. The result of the handling was quickly sent to Makarov. In fact, after learning that Harjanport was destroyed and Ian, Lucy, Wendy, and Natsu were present, Makarov had already guessed that this would be the result. But they didn't expect that the council would give them such a difficult task. Tartaros. Even Makarov had to think twice about this name. In his opinion, Ian was the only one in the guild who was qualified to carry out this kind of mission, besides Guildarts. But 3 years ago, Guildarts accepted a 100-year mission and left the guild, and has not returned yet. Therefore, there is only one person left who can take on this mission. Ian, who was still walking back to Magnolia because of Natsu's transportation sickness, didn't know that Makarov had already arranged the next task for him. He also planned to take a good rest for a few days after returning this time and give himself a vacation. But obviously, his plan was going to fail. Chapter 38. Ian, who had just left Harjan, returned to Harjan again. This time he was alone and did not bring anyone with him. After all, not everyone is qualified to get involved in Tartaros affairs. It must be said that the world of magic is magical. In just a few days, the severely damaged port has been almost rebuilt. Ian found a small boat and hoped that the boat could take him to Galuna Island. When the captain heard that Ian's destination was the cursed island at first, he was reluctant. But when he saw the bulging bag, his eyes immediately turned into the shape of gold coins. "Dear guest, you have found the right person. I am the best sailor in Harjan," the captain said to Ian with a smile on his face, patting his chest. It would be more credible if he could put down his hand on the bag full of gold coins. 2 days later, Ian stood on the deck and looked at the lonely island standing on the sea in the distance. Perhaps because it is sparsely populated, the island is covered with tall trees that block out the sun and has dense vegetation, just like an undeveloped primeval jungle, lush and green, exuding vitality. Directly north of Galuna Island, the ruins of a pyramid-shaped temple stand there, emitting a circle of sacred and pure magic around it, blocking the evil beings from approaching. Selene. A complicated look flashed across Ian's face. "Sir, we can only send you here." When the ship was about 1,000 meters away from Galuna Island, the captain suddenly ordered the sailors to drop the anchor. Then he walked up to Ian and said to him. Ian did not force him. After all, for ordinary people, things like curses are definitely something they should stay away from. The captain with the best sailing skills in Harjan was greedy enough to send him here. Under the shocked gazes of the captain and a dozen crew members, Ian jumped off the deck, stood steadily on the sea, and then walked towards the nearby island as if walking on flat ground. After landing on Galuna Island, a breeze with a little moisture hits you. Unlike Magnolia, where it is spring all year round, the climate on Galuna Island is more humid and muggy. Ian walked across the rocky beach and headed directly north of the island. According to the council's investigation report, Tartaros appeared near the ruins. At the same time, inside the pyramid-shaped ruins, goddess of the chill moon Sela looked out as if she had sensed something. "I'm going to be away for a while." Suddenly, she interrupted her subordinate who was reporting the progress, then stood up and walked out. 2 kilometers away from the ruins, Sela and Ian met each other and stared at each other for a long time without saying a word. In the end, it was Ian who broke the silence first. "I didn't expect that the little girl back then has grown up so much." Ian had a gentle smile on his face and gestured with his right hand at the height of his thigh. "People grow up, and so do demons," Sela said coldly, "but Dean, you are the same as you were 400 years ago, without any change." Ian smiled bitterly and did not refute, but opened his arms. The next second, Sela jumped into his arms like a young swallow. "Dean." Sela, who usually appears to be indifferent, now burst into tears like a fragile little girl. On the other side, Magnolia. Natsu was lying on the table in a rare listless state. Happy, who was usually lively, was lying next to Natsu like a frost-bitten eggplant. The man and the cat seemed to have lost their souls. It turned out that a few days ago, in order to pay the fine imposed by the council for the time penalty on Harjan port, the cash-strapped Natsu took Lucy to take a seemingly simple commission. Go to the mansion of Duke Aval in Shirotsum town and get a book to get a reward of 200,000 gold. The reason why Natsu found Lucy was very simple: Duke Aval was recruiting a blonde maid. Unfortunately, Natsu and Lucy did not earn the 200,000 commission. Instead, they were punished by the council for destroying the Duke of Abar's mansion, which made Natsu's already poor family even worse. "Sure enough, I shouldn't have believed you," Lucy said to Natsu unhappily at the bar, supporting her chin with one hand. Not only did she fail to earn 200,000 gold, but she was also fined 100,000 gold by the council. Rounding it off, Lucy felt like she had missed out on 100 million. "Doesn't Uncle Jude give you 300,000 yuan for living expenses every month?" Lisana said with a smile after bringing Lucy a drink. Although they had only known each other for a month, Lisana and Lucy were like good friends who had known each other for years and soon became close friends who could talk about anything. That was why Lysina knew such a private matter as Jude giving Lucy 300,000 yuan in living expenses every month. It's different. Lucy said very seriously, since I am now the wizard of fairy tale, I can't rely too much on Dad and Mom. But then Lucy slumped down on the table again, but if this continues, I will have to use the living expenses my father gave me next month. As soon as these words were spoken, even someone as gentle as Lysina didn't know how to comfort her. After all, not everyone is qualified to be so ordinary. Didn't you see that those around who heard this covered their faces and walked away from Lucy in shame? At this moment, the door of the guild was suddenly pushed open, and Loki rushed in with a look of horror on his face. Oh no! Urza and Ursha are back. The guild suddenly fell into a dead silence, and then all kinds of panic and noisy sounds broke out at once, and everyone ran around in a panic. Those who were preparing to go out to work but were still hesitating about which commission to accept no longer hesitated, and tore off a piece of paper and asked Lysina to help them register before leaving the guild in a hurry. Along with the sound of footsteps, 2 large and 1 small figures approached from afar, and everyone in the guild swallowed their saliva. I heard your voices as soon as I entered the city. I really envy you for not having to work. Urusha, who was wearing a white long dress tied at the waist with a yellow cloth and her long black hair tied with a white hairpin, said with a smile. Hearing her sarcastic tone, everyone who remained in the guild gasped. Ian told them from personal experience that whenever Urusha spoke in this tone, it meant that she was in a very bad mood. However, there are always some unlucky people who accidentally bring bad luck upon her. Grey, is it that my words are no longer effective or that you have reached your rebellious phase? Urusha spotted Grey in the crowd with only his underwear left, and immediately pulled him out. Oh no, when? Grey was so frightened that he didn't even have time to escape and turned into an ice sculpture standing in the center of the guild. Chapter 39. So scary. The other people in the guild were trembling with fear when they saw this scene. None of them even saw how Urusha made her move. Natsu. Urza also started calling out names at this time. Love. Natsu, who had been listless before, suddenly became happy and stood up with a flattering look on his face. I heard that you destroyed Harjanport while working. Because of this, Ian had to accept the commission issued by the council. Urza looked at Natsu coldly, as if looking at a dead person. Oh no! Seeing Urza's reaction, Natsu knew that he would not be able to escape today. But sitting and waiting for death was obviously not his character. Without waiting for Urza to make any move, Natsu took the lead. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. Natsu rushed towards Urza with flames in his hands and excitement on his face. Completion. The other people in the guild covered their eyes with their hands, not wanting to see the cruel scene that was about to happen. Really snap. Pop. Bang. The first 2 sounds were the sound of Urza blocking Natsu's attack and slapping him away, and the third sound was the sound of Natsu slamming headfirst into the roof. After dealing with the 2 biggest troublemakers, Urusha and Urza, who had both intimidated the others and vented their anger, turned their attention to Myra Jane and Lysina behind the bar. Myra, is the president here? Urza said seriously. The president has gone to attend the regular meeting. Myra, who was wearing a pink dress and had completely changed her image of a little gangster from her childhood, said with a gentle smile on her face. If that's the case, there's nothing we can do. Urza sighed, then turned his attention to Myra. Myra, I need your help. Hearing that Urza actually asked Myra for help, everyone in the guild went wild. Someone even slapped him hard. You must be kidding. That Urza actually needs help. This is probably the first time in history. Everyone started talking about it. Myra saw Urza's serious expression and knew that this matter was very serious, so her expression suddenly became serious. It turns out that Urusha and Urza unexpectedly received some bad news while working this time. The Dark Guild Eisenwald has obtained the magic lullaby from the legendary Book of Zeref, and seems to be planning to use lullaby to do some not so good things. Considering that Eisenwald is a dark guild affiliated with Oration Cease, Urusha and Urza, who had experienced the joint crusade 6 years ago, did not dare to act rashly, so they wanted to bring Ian to deal with this matter. But on their way back to the guild, they heard about the incident at Harjanport. Later, they met other colleagues who were working outside and learned that Ian had accepted the commission issued by the council to the guild and had left. That's why they looked so grumpy when they returned to the guild. But now Ian is out for work, and Guildmaster Makarov is not here either. Urza can only invite Myra Jane, who is also an S-class wizard, to go with her to gather intelligence. The next morning, Urusha and Urza went out, and this time they did not bring Mirti with them. Speaking of Mirti, she was a girl that Arusha saved on her way to work. Her parents were killed by the Dark Guild, leaving only Mirti. Arusha took pity on her and brought her back to the guild. Even Ian exclaimed that fate is truly a magical thing when he saw Mirti. Back to the topic. Arusha, Urza, and Myra met at the station. However, when boarding the train, Arusha saw 4 sneaky figures. As expected, it was Lucy, Grey, Natsu, and Happy. Natsu and Happy came with Urza and the other 3, while Grey and Lucy saw Natsu sneaking around and followed him to see what he was going to do. At this point, Urza did not send the 3 back. After all, if the opponent was just the Dark Guild under Oration Cease, they could still play a big role. But Natsu had obviously forgotten that he was not very good at transportation before he boarded the train. After the train started, he immediately collapsed on the chair. What a useless guy! Grey leaned against the window, supporting his head with one hand, and mocked Natsu. Natsu wanted to fight back, but he was so weak that even opening his mouth was a luxury. Bang! Urza punched Natsu on the head and he fainted immediately. Isn't this a lot better? Lucy and Grey wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads at the same time. How can it be okay if the person fainted? Urza, what exactly happened? Grey asked with a serious expression. To be honest, it was hard for him to imagine how difficult the problem was. Even Urza and Ultear were not sure of solving it together, and they even had to involve Myra, who was also an S-class wizard. Such a terrifying lineup could even defeat any Dark Guild below the Balam Alliance, but judging from Urza's reaction, he didn't seem to have much confidence. Our opponent this time is the Dark Guild Eisenwald. Urza said solemnly, they intend to use Lullaby to achieve a certain goal. Lullaby. The 2 people and the cat immediately showed surprised expressions when they heard this familiar name. It turned out that after completing the commission to sneak into the Duke of Alba's mansion to steal the secretary, Lucy and Natsu happened to meet Grey, who had also completed the work and was about to return on their way back to Magnolia. But before the 3 of them could say a few words, they were attacked by several magicians. They also heard the word lullaby from the attackers. Lullaby, also known as the lullaby, is one of the dark magic in the Book of Ziref. Legend has it that anyone who hears the sound of lullaby will be killed immediately, so it is also called the curse song. Myra came out to explain to Grey and Lucy, and then she showed a puzzled expression, but it is said that this magic has been sealed many years ago. How did Eisenwald find it? This is not important. What is important is that once they succeed in blowing lullaby, it will cause extremely serious consequences. We must stop them. Urza said seriously. If it's just Eisenwald, there's no need to make such a big fuss, right? Grey asked doubtfully. Eisenwald is a Dark Guild affiliated with Oration Cease. Arusha said, Grey, have you forgotten the joint subjugation operation 6 years ago? Grey and Myra's faces changed slightly. Although they were not directly involved, they still heard about the painful price paid for that action. The council headquarters was destroyed, and the first 4 elements, the rulers of the Phantom, were directly defeated. Seeing Lucy's confused look, Myra briefly summarized the joint crusade against the Blood Forest and told her. Are we going to face such a formidable opponent this time? Lucy was so scared that she was sweating. Why would a fledgling magician like her have to face such a dangerous situation? But Urza shook her head. There is no direct evidence that Oration Cease is involved, but for the sake of caution, I invited Myra to join the action. Then she turned her gaze to Myra. I have already informed Ian about this morning, but he seems unable to come back for the time being, so he just asked us to be careful. Myra said softly. Urza nodded, and then said nothing more. They got off at Onmyoji station, which was also the place where Arusha and Urza heard the news about Lullaby. Chapter 40. Galuna Island, inside the lunar ruins. Ian fell into deep thought after he ended his call with Myra. Lullaby? Is it the vile demon in the Book of Ziref? Sela, who had heard the entire conversation between the 2, asked, I remember that it was you, Dean, who sealed it. Yes, that guy. Ian nodded helplessly. When Ziref created it, he thought it was too dangerous, so he asked me to seal it. That kind of inferior man-made demon wouldn't cause much trouble even if it were released. Sela obviously didn't understand why a mere spell song required such caution. What's important is not the curse song, but what's hidden behind it. Ian said calmly. Although more than 400 years have passed, the seal cannot be opened by just anybody. Besides, although the spell song is nothing to a powerful magician, it is a deadly threat to ordinary people. Do we need to go back? Sela asked. It will take some time to remove the spell from Dai Lionra. Ian pondered for a moment and then shook his head, with a slight smile on his face. Since they deliberately lured me away, let's do as they wish. At Onaba Station, Arusha, the other 5 people and the cat fell into silence as they watched the rapidly departing train. Natsu is still in the car. There's no other way. We have to do this. Urza ignored the conductor's attempts to stop him and simply pulled the emergency stop valve. The train, which was traveling at high speed, suddenly braked and stopped. Then she immediately rented a magic 4-wheeled vehicle and chased towards the train at an extremely fast speed. I seem to have seen the penalty notice from the council. At this moment, Lucy's eyes lost their luster, and she seemed to see her wallet gradually moving away. A few minutes later, the speeding magic 4-wheeled vehicle caught up with the train that was about to restart. Natsu! Gray yelled, and the next second, a dark shadow jumped out of the train window and hit Gray, who was lying on the roof. The two of them immediately rolled off the train. Seeing this, Urza quickly stepped on the brakes, and the wheels stopped after making a harsh friction sound on the ground. That's too much. They actually left me in the car. Natsu covered his forehead and got up from the ground, complaining to the others. I just met a strange guy in the car. He seemed to be from Eisenwald. Bang! Natsu was hit by Urza as soon as he finished speaking. You idiot, Eisenwald is the man we're after, and you actually let him get away. I haven't heard you say that before. Natsu covered his swollen cheek, feeling full of question marks and very aggrieved. I just finished talking, were you listening to me seriously? Urza put his hands on his hips and roared at Natsu with an angry face. Hearing this, Arusha couldn't help but cover her face, and the corners of Myra, Gray, and Lucy's mouths kept twitching. It was you who knocked him out just now. Of course, they obviously wouldn't say this to Urza, who was angry, so Natsu could only suffer for the time being. Let's catch up with him before he gets far away. Ultear interrupted Urza's reprimand of Natsu and sat in the driver's seat. I'll drive from now on. Urza and Myra's faces changed slightly, but considering the overall situation, they did not raise any objections. However, due to the limited space in the car, Natsu and Gray could only lie on the roof in the end. Hold on tight, be careful not to fly out. Urusha reminded, and without waiting for others to speak, she put the control ring of the magic 4-wheeled vehicle on her wrist. As she injected magic power into it, the magic 4-wheeled vehicle made a loud roar and then shot out like a rocket. The speed was 3 times faster than when Urza was driving. And not only that, Urusha seemed to think that the speed was too slow. She was seen driving the magic 4-wheeled vehicle while continuously releasing cold air, forming a smooth layer of ice on the ground, helping the magic 4-wheeled vehicle to speed up again. At this inhuman speed, both Gray on the roof and Lucy in the car couldn't help but scream. Even Urza and Myra's faces turned slightly pale. What, you said Natsu? At the moment of departure, his eyes turned white and he passed out. If Urusha had not frozen his hands to the roof in time, he would have been thrown out. The one who performed the best among the group was actually the cat Happy. Then, along the direction of the railway tracks, a strange scene appeared. A phantom accompanied by miserable cries was moving forward like a hurricane, and the wind along the way even broke the tree trunks. Finally at Gunyoki Station, they managed to catch up with the train that had stopped there for some reason. They are there. Gray saw the wizards who were constantly driving the passengers in the station. Before he finished speaking, a powerful dark magic suddenly erupted. Receive the soul of Satan with your whole body. Wrapped in dazzling purple magic, a pair of black wings grew out of Myra's back. Her white hair automatically floated up, her arms turned into hideous claws, and a black tail fell heavily to the ground. Myra, who had completed her transformation, turned into a shadow and rushed into Gunyoki Station. With one claw, she killed an Eisenwald wizard who was driving away passengers in an extremely cruel way. So strong. Lucy, who had only seen Myra's gentle side since she joined the guild, was so shocked that her eyes bulged out. It was the first time she saw Myra in battle. This is the true face of Myra Jane Strauss, the S-class wizard of fairy tale, who is known as the demon. Lucy, don't be fooled by Marajana's usual appearance. Seeing his best friend and mortal enemy so powerful, Urza's fighting spirit was also aroused. Change to Tianlun armor. A white light flashed, and Urza rushed into the station wearing silver white armor, Tianlun sword of chaos. Sword lights fell like raindrops, and those Eisenwald wizards who were acting recklessly were stopped by this sudden attack. Those who were slow to react were directly annihilated by Urza's sword. Light. Chapter 41. At Gunyoki Station, a man with short silver hair, a fierce look, tattoos under both eyes, a naked upper body and a large sickle on his back noticed the movement outside the station. What's going on? But before he could send anyone out to check, Urza and Myra called in. Fairy tale. The man recognized the guild emblem on the back of Myra's hand at a glance, and his brows knitted into a ball. You came so quickly. Brother Erigor, it's them. At this moment, a dull-haired man saw Natsu and his friends entering the station behind Urza and Myra Jane, and immediately pointed at them and shouted. The short-haired man, Erigor, narrowed his eyes dangerously, and suddenly swung the huge sickle on his shoulder forward, and several invisible wind blades attacked Urza and Myra Jane. I had planned to let you live a few more days, but I didn't expect you to come so soon. In that case, I'll kill you here. Erigor swung his sickle twice, a cruel sneer on his lips. However, what responded to him was a purple-black magic ball that passed by his ear. Feeling the airwave caused by the explosion behind him, Erigor's face changed slightly. The last person who said that to me has gone to hell to repent. I hope you won't let me down. Myra stared at Erigor coldly, like a hunter staring at his prey. The thick tail behind her swayed gently, and the next second she appeared in front of Erigor, grabbed his cheek and pressed him directly into the ground. Brother Erigor. The other people in Eisenwald were shocked when they saw this scene. They all wanted to step forward to support, but they were blocked by the sharp sword falling from the sky. Tianlun. Sword of Cycle. White hair, a demon-like violent attack style, and crimson hair, an extremely fast changing speed. It's the demon and the fairy queen. Someone in the crowd finally recognized Myra and Urza's identities, but it was too late. At the end of the crowd, the man with the pear-haired face felt a little scared when he saw that even his most respected brother Erigor was pinned to the ground and rubbed repeatedly by Myra without any ability to fight back. But he just took 2 steps back and bumped into a cold wall. He turned around and saw a woman blocking his way with a smile. Are you planning to abandon your ace and run away alone? How can you repair it? Kageyama roared ferociously and controlled the shadow to attack Urusha. However, even if driving the magic four-wheeler consumed a lot of magic power, Urusha was not someone that any small card lami could mess with. She opened her right hand, and a silver-white magic circle lit up. A large amount of cold air surged out from her palm, and in just a moment, the shadow stabbing towards her and Kageyama were frozen into ice sculptures. It's Urusha. At this time, someone noticed what was happening in the back. When they saw the lifelike ice sculpture and Urusha standing next to it, their last psychological defense line was completely broken. Compared to Urza and Myra, Urusha's name is not as widely known, but everyone who knows her is more terrified of her style of doing things. In some cases, Urusha's methods are even worse than those of the dark guilds. After all, the fairy queen and the demons only cause physical damage at most, but the witch Urusha prefers to make trouble on the spiritual level. This also makes her notoriety far more vicious than Urza and Myra. I'll tell you everything. Karaka, a fat man with green hair, knelt on the ground with sweat on his forehead. He was the one who recognized Urusha's identity just now. Erigor wants to use Lullaby to catch all the guild leaders in one fell swoop while they are attending the routine meeting. Without the leadership of the guild leaders, the regular guilds will inevitably fall into chaos. This is our chance. Karaka spilled the beans and told Erigor's plan in detail. Erigor, who saw this scene, tried to stop it, but was beaten back underground by Myra, a soul destroyer. Where is Lullaby now? Seeing that Karaka was still hesitating, Urza immediately put the sword on his neck, and the freezing cold frightened him so much that he immediately confessed. Erigor, Lullaby is on Erigor now. Hearing this, Myra immediately put away her magic, but the next second Erigor rushed out, riding the whirlwind and flying out without looking back. Want to run? Myra snorted coldly, and flapped her wings behind her. In the blink of an eye, she surpassed Erigor and kicked him back. Erigor fell heavily to the ground and rolled 2.5 times before stopping on a pillar. Then a skull-shaped flute fell out from his waist. It's Lullaby! Lucy exclaimed, and immediately everyone's attention was drawn to it. Gray immediately rushed forward and wanted to take the dangerous object in his hands first. But as soon as he touched Lullaby, another pale and slender hand pressed his hand. It's Erigor. At this moment, his eyes turned bloodshot, and his whole body exuded a strong smell of blood, as if he had just walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. His entire aura had changed drastically from before. "Grey, come back!" Urza shouted anxiously, but it was too late. A ray of light flashed in Eriger's scarlet eyes, and the next second, blood flowers burst out from all parts of Grey's body. The whole person was soaked in blood, and he looked extremely miserable. Then Eriger grabbed Grey's wrist and lifted him up, throwing him out like a broken doll, hitting Natsu, who rushed over to save Grey, and the two of them fell out immediately like rolling gourds. But just as Eriger was about to continue his attack, Arusha suddenly crushed a crystal ball. Thick liquid-like magic flowed out of the broken crystal ball, and finally gathered into a human figure standing in front of Eriger, tightly grasping his arm that was about to fall. "Long time no see, Greys." Chapter 42. Eriger, Ignatius Greys broke free from the grip on his arm and leaped onto the lamppost, looking down at Ian, or more precisely, Ian's phantom. Seeing his indifferent attitude, Ian couldn't help but sigh, "You don't even want to call me uncle." Lucy and the others, who were surprised by the sudden change a second ago, suddenly froze in expression after hearing these words, and question marks popped up on their heads at the same time. What kind of abstract development is this? Ignatius Woods Grey's cheeks turned red, and a hint of anger appeared in his scarlet eyes. "A mere human." "I'm your uncle." Ian interrupted him with his head tilted. "I am Angsur Ramel, the god of life and death. Your father and I used to be sworn brothers." Ian looked at him disdainfully. "How dare lowly humans offend God? Call me uncle." Ian crossed his arms over his chest, his face full of self-righteousness making people want to punch him. "Shut up!" Ignatius Woods Greys roared with a livid face, not even bothering to maintain his condescending attitude. "No matter how much you try to escape, it can't change the fact that I'm your uncle." Ian grinned wickedly. Ignatius Woods was so angry that he was shaking all over, his eyes were wide open, and the anger in his eyes was almost condensed into substance. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turned white due to the force, and his breathing became rapid and unstable. How come he didn't realize that this guy was so despicable more than 400 years ago? The main reason is that I was resurrected only 400 years ago, and I am in my 20s or 30s, so I am not ashamed to do this. Ian's cheeks flushed slightly. He seemed to have guessed what Ignatius Woods was thinking, and a hint of shyness suddenly appeared on his face. "Why are you blushing? And what's the point of that shy look? Does such a thing as face really exist for you?" Seeing this scene, not to mention the enemy Ignatius Woods, even Arusha and Urza couldn't hold back their expressions. However, Ian's words still revealed a very important message to Arusha and the others. Ian seemed to have died many years ago, and then resurrected more than 400 years ago. It is just unknown what state he is in now. This has gone off topic. Ignatius Woods was completely silenced by Ian's shamelessness. He took dozens of deep breaths before he could barely suppress the anger in his heart and resumed his arrogant and indifferent attitude. "Ian Bell, if you want to provoke me, don't waste your time," Ignatius Woods said coldly. Ian chuckled and gave up the idea of teasing him. "If I'm not mistaken, you are Edelas who returned through the soul 10 years ago." Arusha was shocked when she heard this, as she and Ian first met 10 years ago. Ignatius Woods did not refute, but his scarlet eyes revealed a hint of sarcasm. The stupidity and arrogance of mankind were clearly revealed at that moment. "You can say this after you embark on the path to becoming a god," Ian said lightly. Ignatius Woods' eyes flashed with anger again, but he quickly returned to indifference. "Your true body seems to be still on Galuna Island." Ian smiled faintly, as if he had already guessed that all this was the other party's trick. "Same here." Ignatius Woods' eyes focused, and the next second he swung the scythe in his hand fiercely, cutting out a huge crescent-shaped blood-red blade light. Ian stretched out his hand calmly, and an iron sword flew into his hand, and then slashed it in the air. The blood-red blade light was immediately split into 2 parts, flew past Ian, and hit the station not far away. With a loud roar, the building with powerful protective magic on its surface turned into ruins in the dust. Then the two rushed towards each other, and the long sword and sickle kept colliding, making crisp sounds. The two people's movements were extremely fast, even leaving a trail of afterimages. The two sides fought for more than 10 rounds, and neither was able to hurt the other. Absorb. After another collision, Ignatius Woods took advantage of the situation to distance himself. His scarlet eyes flashed, and the magic power in Ian's body began to dissipate rapidly. Blood marking, mirror pupil. Ian's pupils also turned into a bright golden color at this moment, and the next second Ignatius Woods found that his magic power was also constantly flowing into Ian's body, replenishing his increasingly illusory body. Word spirit. Dream taper. Taking advantage of Ignatius Woods' distraction, Ian quickly closed the distance between them and pointed a finger at his forehead. Ignatius Woods only felt that his consciousness was becoming heavier and heavier, and the color of his scarlet pupils was gradually fading. Heir's consciousness was gradually awakening. But soon, Ignatius Woods used his own strength to suppress Heir's consciousness again. But just when he was about to regain control of his body, he was hit hard on the chest. A large mouthful of blood spurted out, and Heir's body suddenly flew out like a kite with a broken string, and fell heavily to the ground. When he got up again, Ignatius Woods was in control of the body again. But even a good cook cannot cook without rice. Even if Ignatius Woods was strong, he was helpless in the face of this almost exhausted body. You win this time. Ignatius Woods glared at Ian coldly, without saying any more nonsense, and the scarlet pupils gradually dissipated. After losing the support of Ignatius Woods, Heir's body also collapsed to the ground. Seeing Ian successfully defeat the enemy, Arusha and the others finally breathed a sigh of relief. But before they could communicate with Ian, he turned into starlight and disappeared. Obviously, the battle with Ignatius Woods also completely exhausted all the power of his mental body. Several people looked at each other and fell into silence for a long time. It was not until they heard Gray's groan that they remembered that there was another injured person here. While several people were bandaging Gray and treating his injuries, no one noticed that Kageyama, who was frozen by Arusha before, had broken free at some point. He quietly picked up the lullaby that had fallen to the ground and no one cared about it, then jumped onto the magic four-wheeler and rushed out. Hearing the roar of the magic four-wheeled vehicle, Urza and the others realized that something was wrong. However, they could only watch Kageyama and lullaby disappear quickly from their sight. Chapter 43. Galuna Island. Ian slowly opened his eyes. Is it the original sin? Sela asked anxiously. Not only that, he's also their president, Ignatius Woods Gray's, my cute nephew. Ian nodded, with an unconcealable smile on the corner of his mouth. Sela's expression was a little strange. She could even imagine the man's expression at that time. Anger. Break defense. Helpless. Autistic. Finally, even numbness. When Sela thought of the culprit who destroyed the academy more than 400 years ago, and the son of the god of life and death Angsur Ramel, whose CPU was burned out by his own dean, he felt that the depression of more than 400 years dissipated a lot in an instant, and he felt much more clear-headed. After this incident, Ignatius Woods will most likely not take any action in the short term. Ian continued, next, you should focus on solving the magic on Dai Lionla, and leave the council to me. What about lullaby? It's not a good idea to let Zeref's dark magic hang out like this. Sela reminded. Ian's expression froze for a moment. He had even forgotten about this matter because of Ignatius Woods. But with Arusha and Myra around, Makarov's wallet should be safe, probably. Just when Ian was worried about Makarov's wallet. Kriba City, this is the city where the Guild Presidents Alliance holds its regular meetings. The so-called Guild Presidents Alliance is a spontaneous organization of major guilds. Although it is under the jurisdiction of the council, it also has the function of checking and balancing the council. The so-called routine meetings were nothing more than a place for the presidents of various guilds to get together to eat, drink, bond, and exchange information. As an aside, ever since Makarov and the president of the Phantom Ruler, José Porla, had a fight at a meeting a few years ago and defeated the other, José Porla has never attended this meeting again. At this time, Makarov was sitting at a table, drinking beer and eating chicken legs, while showing off Lucy and Natsu's achievements to his friends. At this moment, a blue bird delivered a letter to Makarov's wounded body. He opened the envelope, and the shadow of Lysina with a smile on her face emerged with a magic circle. Grandpa President, thank you for your hard work in attending the routine meeting. What do you think? This is our guild's signature girl. Isn't she cute? Makarov excitedly showed off to the presidents of other guilds around him, but his smile did not last long. A wonderful thing happened while the president was away. Lysina said happily. Her sunny smile infected everyone, and Makarov was even more proud. Urza, and sister have teamed up. Lysina said something in the most gentle tone that made Makarov terrified, but this was not the scariest thing. By the way, it seems that Natsu, Gray, and Lucy also secretly followed. But I think with my sister and the others here, there shouldn't be any problems. That's the thing, have fun. As the magic circle extinguished, Listena's shadow also disappeared. Makarov's smile and highlights also disappeared. He stood there with his mouth wide open as if petrified, and the chicken drumstick in his hand fell onto the table. It seems that what we are worried about is about to come true. Goldmine, the president of Quattro Cerberus, joked, Makarov, your coffin is about to be lost. It's over, they will really destroy a city. Makarov collapsed on the table, muttering to himself with lifeless eyes. Just when Makarov was worried, Ultear had already driven the magic four-wheeled vehicle at lightning speed towards Kruba city. They had previously interrogated other people in Eisenwald and found out their plan, to use Lullaby to capture all the leaders of the regular guilds during the regular meeting. Then, when the regular guilds were in chaos, the dark guilds would rise up and reverse the decline of being suppressed for so many years. Although this idea is naive, Arusha and the others cannot sit idly by and watch this happen. After all, their president is still there. As night fell, Arusha and the others who had just arrived outside the venue saw Makarov facing Kageyama, who was about to blow the flute alone in front of them, and were about to rush forward, but were stopped by Bob, the president of Blue Pegasus, and Goldmine, the president of Quattro Cerberus. Just watch carefully. Goldmine said with a faint smile on his face, leaning against the tree trunk. Under the nervous gazes of Urza and the others, Kageyama slowly raised the flute to his lips. Just blow it, and everything will change. He kept urging himself in his heart, but looking at the calm old man in front of him, he was still unable to take the most crucial step. Nothing will change. As if he had heard his inner voice, Makarov said, weak people will always be weak, but not all weakness is bad. Kageyama's heart trembled slightly, and he unconsciously put down the flute that was already at his lips. Humans are weak creatures. They feel uneasy when they are alone. That's why we need guilds and partners. In order to survive, we need to support each other. Clumsy people are more likely to encounter bottlenecks than others, and may take a long detour. However, as long as you believe in tomorrow and take a brave step, strength will surge up, and you can survive with a smile. You don't need to rely on this flute at all. Hearing these words, Kageyama's mind was shaken violently. After Makarov completely exposed the lie that had supported him to this point, his body could not help but collapse, the horrible flute in his hand fell to the ground, and tears of regret slid down his cheeks. I lost. Kageyama finally succumbed to Makarov's heart-healing words. Urza and others, who had been worried about their president, immediately rushed forward upon seeing this. President. Urza even gave Makarov a bear hug, but unfortunately she forgot that she was wearing heavy armor and almost sent Makarov away on the spot. Arusha and Myra did not make the same mistake again, but just as they were about to reach out to pick up the ugly flute on the ground, an evil magic power suddenly surged out from the flute and forced them back. They are all good-looking but useless wizards. A huge purple-black magic circle suddenly appeared in the sky. Amidst the lightning and thunder, the flute-shaped lullaby began to expand violently. Accompanied by a sudden earthquake, a huge dead tree demon appeared in front of everyone. I can't bear to watch this anymore. I'll just eat your souls myself. The deadwood demon roared to the sky, and the harsh sound made everyone feel extremely uncomfortable. The weak ones even couldn't help but vomit violently. Let's go. Hearing Urza speak, Natsu and Grey, who had been unable to contain themselves, immediately rushed forward. Ice make lancers. Fire dragons roar. Attacked by ice and fire from both sides, the dead tree demon soon had half of its body frozen and the other half ignited by the scorching flames. Change to Tianlun armor. Urza, wearing silver-white armor and holding two swords, passed by Lullaby at an extremely fast speed. Annoying bugs. Lullaby, who was hit hard, immediately fell into a rage. He swung his huge arm to force Urza and the other two back. When he was about to cast magic, he was hit head-on by a concentrated purple-black magic ball. Soul Exterminator. A dazzling purple light burst out, and a huge roar resounded throughout Web Valley. The villa where the routine meeting was held was instantly blasted into ruins by Myra Jane. However, this was not the end, as Arusha's magic followed closely, not giving Lullaby any chance to breathe. Arc of Time, Glory of all gods. The emerald green magic ball was suspended above Lullaby, and dense light beams were bombarding it at a 360-degree angle. Soon, the diffuse smoke and dust engulfed Lullaby. So strong. The presidents of various guilds who were watching this scene from a distance were all dumbfounded. This was dark magic created by Zverev, the most brutal dark mage over 400 years ago, yet fairy tales people beat them without any chance of fighting back. Lullaby also obviously realized that passively taking the beating would damage his own face. He was seen howling to the sky under Urusha's dense bombardment. The purple-black magic circle in the sky quickly shrank. A magical power filled with the breath of decay spread around with his roar, and the surrounding flowers, plants, and trees withered. Urza! Urza immediately understood what Urusha meant when she heard her shout. A powerful magic power suddenly erupted, and the white magic power covered Urza's whole body like flames. The strong pressure even made Lullaby feel a little panic. This feeling of oppression. Could it be that the second magic source is released? The holy dragons. Powerful magic gathered in Urza's mouth, and white magic lit up in front of her. The next second, a dragon flame filled with destructive aura spewed out. Roar! Before being completely devoured by the dragon flames, images flashed through Lullaby's mind like a revolving lantern, and finally they all converged into one sentence, which damn BD let me out. Chapter 44. Galuna Island is silent at night, with waves crashing against the rocks and beaches, and the sound of the waves is like the beat of a low drum. The sea breeze carried by the waves blows across the island, the leaves rustle in the wind, and sometimes you can hear the intermittent calls of some animals. The moonlight shines on the earth, covering Galuna Island with a layer of silver. Under the moonlight, the temple of Moon on the north side of the island looks so holy. Walking in the silent and deserted passage that was as bright as day under the dual illumination of moonlight and torches, the blue-grey brick walls were covered with a faint silver glow. Ian reached out and touched the uneven murals on the wall. It was a scene of the believers of the moon goddess Selene praying to her more than 1,000 years ago. He was still very young at that time, so young that even after experiencing the experiences of being ridden by thousands of dragons just after traveling through time and returning to an unfamiliar era through the eclipse gate, he was still fearless. Ahem, of course, he was not fearless at all. In that era ruled by gods, even powerful beings like dragons and demons could only rely on the gods for survival. Weak humans could only rely on their faith in the gods to receive some charity. The moon goddess Selene is the only exception. She neither needs people's faith nor has compassion for all living things in this world. Selene's kindness led to a sharp increase in her followers in this world. People spontaneously built temples and erected statues for her, praying to her and blessing her. Because of her kindness, Selene became an outlier among the gods and the target of public criticism. The gods, unable to tolerate this, led their followers to launch a holy war against Selene. But Ian had already awakened magic at that time. Under his protection and guidance, the first group of people who awakened magic and became wizards all called him the ancestor of magic. The struggle of faith is undoubtedly the most brutal war in the world. Fanatical believers wield their knives against their own kind, and even powerful dragons and demons cannot stay out of it. But the progress of the war was not as smooth as the gods had expected. They originally thought they had the advantage of outnumbering others, but with the intervention of Ian, an alien, the war came to an unpredictable end. The gods' followers were defeated by the first generation of wizard corps established by Ian. As the human who led the wizard corps, Ian also came into the sight of the gods and was regarded by them as the biggest threat. It was at this time that Ian and Ankersel Ramel met. At that time, Anksar Ramel was just an honest young man. He was a loyal believer of the moon goddess and also a loyal fan of Ian. After possessing the power of the moon goddess and awakening magic, he undoubtedly became one of the strongest wizards and a comrade in arms that Ian could trust. But the brutal holy war made Anksar Ramel see the fragility of life and the fear of death. After following Ian on the road of killing gods, his remaining awe of the gods disappeared. After losing the blessing of faith, the gods were defeated by Selene's counterattack. The continuous death of gods made them fall into great panic. It turned out that humans were not leeks that they could harvest at will, and the powerful humans even had enough power to rival the gods. Driven by fear, the last few gods cursed Ian before their fall. His magic became forbidden magic, and anyone who touched it would suffer great misfortune. The first to bear the brunt was Ian himself. Just when all the gods except Selene fell and everyone was immersed in the joy of victory in the war, he was stabbed in the kidney by Anksar Ramel. Having witnessed the cruelty of war, experienced the baptism of war and always thinking, Anksar Ramel finally came to a conclusion: an overly powerful and uncontrolled force is the biggest destabilizing factor threatening the stability of the world. Ian is the overpowered and uncontrolled X factor in Anksar Ramel's eyes. His power to kill gods has threatened the moon goddess Selene. And his increasing number of believers will make him the next god. So the stubborn Anxel Ramel decisively bit Ian's kidney. But even so, Anchor Ramel is still no match for Ian. In desperation, he could only choose to absorb the remaining power of the gods. Only by gathering the power of the gods into one body did he finally gain enough strength to compete with or even defeat Ian. The battle between the two lasted for several months. Countless lands and islands sank in their battle. Two huge cracks spanned the sky for several months. Even the world was divided into three by their battle. In the end, Ian, who was hit in the back, was just one step away from falling into cocoon state. However, Anxer Ramel was not having an easy time either. He was severely damaged by his judgment magic. The power of rules would always linger on his soul and constantly destroy his body. He could only barely survive by relying on deep sleep and a large amount of vitality. After this battle, the moon goddess Selene chose to exile herself in the starry sky, and Ian and Anxer Ramel gradually became untouchable legends in people's mouths. It was not until more than 400 years ago that Ian woke up again, and the fateful war between him and Anxer Ramel sounded again. This time, he not only wanted to avenge the shame of being beaten by the waist, but also to make up for the regrets of his previous life. Chapter 45. Ian's thoughts gradually drifted back from more than 1,000 years ago. Looking at the murals that were filled with a faint sacred atmosphere and feeling the holy magic that enveloped the entire temple, an idea suddenly came to Ian's mind. He immediately took out the communication crystal ball and injected magic power into it. After a moment, Myra's portrait appeared in the crystal. "Myra, how's the situation over there? Has Lullaby been resolved?" Ian did not express his thoughts directly, but asked about the situation of the curse song first. "It's solved, but..." Myra's expression seemed a little strange. She moved aside and aimed the crystal ball at the scene behind her. What a tragic scene it was! A crater as big as a falling meteorite appeared in the image of the crystal ball. In the distance, several clearly visible mountaintops disappeared out of thin air, as if they had been destroyed by some powerful force. Ian's mouth twitched, and he seemed to have guessed the answer. Myra then turned the crystal ball to Makarov, who was sitting on the ground and crying, and confirmed his guess. "You guys are really going too far," Ian complained. "I didn't expect the demons in the Book of Zeref to be so weak." Urza's slightly guilty and apologetic voice came from the side. Ian's eyelids twitched. If Lullaby heard this, the coffin lid would burst. "How about this? I just happen to have an idea that requires Myra's cooperation. You come with her and stay out of the spotlight." Ian whispered like a thief, as if he was afraid of being heard by others. "What about the president?" Myra asked in a low voice, her eyes quietly glancing away at Makarov, who was still sitting next to her crying. "It's too small-minded." Ian criticized. "The president is a man who has seen all kinds of big scenes. If you stay here, you will hinder him." But the president was crying really sadly. Lucy said in a low voice. That's... Ian couldn't help but choke when he saw Makarov crying so hard. His brain raced and suddenly an idea came to him. He was crying for joy. That's right, he was crying for joy. The president was crying tears of joy because he saw the growth of the children in the guild. There was a sudden strange silence on the other side of the crystal ball. Whether it was Myra, Urza, Arusha or Lucy, they all wanted to ask Ian,